morning. It is 3 minutes after 10, and I hope this doesn't come as a major surprise to you. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's quite nice some mornings to have the live cover. It doesn't happen very often. It's a mark of how significant a moment is. And then, of course, you have the little voice in your head that starts wondering how significant a moment this actually is. And then you have, the problem I have now is Natasha Clark is in the studio. Nothing personal, Natasha, but when the political editor arrives here, it is evidence that in Westminster, this is huge. And I need a little bit of help from Natasha imminently to make sense of exactly what has happened this morning. But the question I have for you is an amalgam. What do they call it? The young people? A mashup. If you were to take Friday's show and yesterday's show and do what the young people call a mashup, push. I don't know if that sound effect is appropriate or accurate. And frankly, who cares? You do a mashup of Friday's show and Monday's show. You're left with a slightly odd question given the amount of coverage, airtime and attention that this story continues to receive. Am I embarrassed to tell you? No, I'm not embarrassed to tell you this. I'm quietly proud of my honesty. I don't know how important this story is anymore. I have been blown around like a feather in a Morrisons shop doorway. I have no idea how important this story is anymore. The question of whether or not Peter Mandelson should have been sent to Washington in the first place is actually not answered by the events of this morning or yesterday or Friday, and isn't really relevant to the question that I'm about to ask you. Everybody thinks it was an appalling idea now, but spoiler alert, at the time everybody thought it was a brilliant idea. Don't at me to tell me that you didn't think it was a brilliant idea. I am speaking generically. I am generalising. Everyone thought it was a brilliant idea until it was an appalling idea. I can't think of a better example of a unanimous, a nationwide reverse ferret than that one. Everybody thought it was a brilliant idea until everybody suddenly thought it was an appalling idea. And, of course, the heart of that particular conundrum is the one that we identified yesterday. The reason why it was an appalling appointment is the same reason why it was a brilliant appointment. You can't get past that. That is my gift to you during these complicated and complex times. My gift to you, and if you are lucky enough to know people that never listen to this programme, you can pass it off as your own sparkling insight. The reason why this story is so bizarre is because the reason why Peter Mandelson's appointment was brilliant is the same reason why Peter Mandelson's appointment was appalling. And then you come to the role of Ollie Robbins and the question of vetting, which has, if anything, this morning become to me more confusing now than it was before. Because did he actually fail the vetting in the conventional, clear sense that we have been told now for the best part of a week that he didn't, that he did indeed fail the vetting? And I don't know the answer to that question. I've got two thoughts. The first thought is that the smoking gun with regard to Mandelson's appointment is not as smoky as it was before, and that Ollie Robbins looks increasingly like a man more sinned against than sinning. And that is not a moment. That is a incremental issue. That is about Keir Starmer's judgment, his petulance, his rush to judgment, and his attempt to avoid responsibility for almost anything. Sack him, sack him, sack him feels increasingly like a knee-jerk reaction to events that, under Ollie Robbins's account this morning, actually seem to be fairly straightforward and fairly sympathetic. And the thing I said to you yesterday, I think I said this to Natasha off-air, but I said it to you on-air, is that there must have been a conversation that essentially circled this particular drain. He's already been a member of the Privy Council for God knows how long. He's been a Secretary of State. He's held all manner of massive jobs, albeit that he's had to resign from them for lying. Why do we need to vet this guy? If we're vetting him for this job, how could he have held all the previous jobs? Do you see what I mean? Turns out that conversation was indeed had and contributed to what Ollie Robbins has described as a, shall we say, an unseemly enthusiasm, or he uses the phrase, a dismissive approach to vetting from Number 10, which I can sort of understand as well. Would we, before we turn to Natasha, would you like to hear an early entrant into Idiot's Corner this morning? because someone's come out of the blocks at 100 miles an hour, and it is an example of idiocy on at least two levels. So on Friday, I thought Starmer was 52-48 to lose his job. Yesterday, and should have done, I was so, I don't even know what the correct word is, just betrayed almost, let down by the idea that they'd sent someone to Washington, D.C. who failed security vetting. 3 hours of radio on Friday, dancing around that particular maypole. Then over the course of the weekend, my position shifted a bit, but to be honest with you, I was too busy basking in the joy of the best concert I think I've ever been to spend too much time worrying about Ollie Robbins, Peter Mandelson or Keir Starmer. But by the time we got on air yesterday, I did find myself wondering whether we'd fallen into a trap of thinking that this was a story of rather more significance than it actually was. And today I'm caught between the two positions. But our entry into Mid-Idiot's Corner has been in touch to say, how did we now, James, would try and downplay this? And you did hear that correctly. How did we now, James, would try and downplay? Now, it could be that my correspondent is from the Black Country and they don't realise that the word no actually begins with a K. Or it could be that they're as thick as mince. I'm going to go with the latter. 9 minutes after 10 is the time. Natasha Clark is here. What did we learn this morning?
James, I think we've learned a lot this morning, actually. It has been quite a revelatory session that Sir Ollie Robbins, the former Foreign Office Permanent Secretary, has been giving evidence to MPs. He's been talking to Emily Thornberry. She is the chair of that committee, trying to get answers on exactly that question that you just asked. How was it that we sent a man to the United States having, as you say, claimed failed that security vetting? Now, Sir Ollie Robbins did say in a letter today that he thinks there's been a lot of misinformation around this subject. He says that the UK security vetting did not fail Mandelson and the FCA did not overrule their decision. But he also says...
But hang on, that's extraordinary, given the conversations that we've all been having for the last 4 days.
Exactly. Well, you know where that's come from? No. It's come from Number 10. They've been saying those words, failed and didn't clear the vetting. That has come from the heart of the government as they now attempt to, let's be honest, slightly rewrite the version of events which clearly has happened in the last year or so at the heart of government.
Criticism of you. I'm more confused now than I was before you started talking.
Sorry.
That's okay, carry on.
We'll see where we get by the end, shall we? We have heard quite a lot from Ollie Robbins in the last hour or so. I think the most damning thing that I've heard so far is his sort of comments talking about what he described as a dismissive attitude of Number 10 around the whole thing. And essentially we can hear from him now talking about the fact that he was told by Number 10 repeatedly that Sir Ollie Robbins needed to get that clearance and get into post as soon as possible.
I'm afraid I walked into a situation in which there was already a very, very strong expectation, and you will have seen the papers released already under the humble address, that coming from Number 10, that he needed to be in post and in America as quickly as humanly possible. The very first formal communication of this to my predecessor from Number 10 Private Office being that they wanted all this done at pace and Mandelson in post before inauguration.
And actually, James, that's not that surprising, is it? The Prime Minister wants this guy in place before the inauguration, before President Trump is officially appointed as president. He wants him to be in place to smooth that over. And this was all about trying to get somebody in place that they thought that would have a good relationship with Donald Trump. He's got to be there for the inauguration. Right. But actually, I thought the biggest sort of bombshell of the morning has been actually at the heart of government, there was a discussion about whether to vet him entirely, and that the Cabinet Office, apparently, according to Sir Ollie, said that they did not want to vet him.
A position taken from the Cabinet Office was that there was no need to vet Mandelson. He was a member of the House of Lords. He was a Privy Councillor. The risks that attending his appointment were well known and had been made clear to the Prime Minister before appointment. Now, in the end, the FCDO insisted and put its foot down. I understand my predecessor had to be very firm in person. But that was a live debate at the point of announcement, and I think it's important to make that clear to the committee.
OK. Back up a bit. So there's two things going on there. I don't want to toot my own horn, but two things seem to me to be clear. The second hasn't been confirmed. The first has, is that they looked at Peter Mandelson and thought, well, what are we worrying about? It takes blooming months to vet people. He's already a Privy Councillor, which is one of the most august positions any political figure in this country can ever hold. So why are we vetting him to be ambassador to the court of a madman?
Yeah, for sure.
And the second bit, which might explain that unseemly enthusiasm or dismissive approach, whichever you prefer, for me, would be the possible reaction to the reception of the appointment. So if all of the people, myself included, now sitting here wondering how on earth he could ever have been given the nod in the first place, given that his continuing post-conviction association with Epstein was known, all of the people deploying 20/20 hindsight now to throw their arms in the air, clutch their pearls tightly, and kind of question how it ever could have happened, greeted it with such universal admiration and approval that it dialed the tone down. If everybody had been saying, this is outrageous, how can they be sending him? Then the Cabinet Office on Downing Street would have been like, hang on a minute, this is a bit rich, this is a bit risky. We better dial up the vetting process to 11, to paraphrase Spinal Tap. But because everyone was going, hurrah, and also sometimes huzzah, then it got dialed down to it would appear, to about 2.
Yeah, potentially. And he was very insistent that he thinks officials at the Foreign Office did their job. He says, I was never told specifically that Mandelson failed, quote, any sort of checks. He said that he was told at the time, and he says he didn't see these security vetting documents at all, which is quite interesting because obviously they are at the heart of this case. No one has seen them.
Know it's nothing to do with Epstein.
And he said today it's nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein, so it's something else.
And really listen to this programme.
For sure. Sorry, I was off yesterday. Off at home watching the Prime Minister. But cool. He did say, look, he went through this very specific sort of details about what the situation was when he walked into the Foreign Office in January 2025. He said his name was already submitted to the King. He said that he was asked to get this through as, quotes, quickly as humanly possible and before the inauguration. And actually he was asked, well, what would have happened if actually you turned around and said, actually, we're going to have to deny this man clearance? What would have happened? He said it would have been very difficult for us indeed. And he said it would have been very difficult for the US administration. He said that they tend to be very jumpy about who they have with clearance. Of course, if anyone with access to the president doesn't have the proper security clearance, it could have been incredibly embarrassing, not just for number 10, not just for him, but of course for the King, who'd already approved this appointment. So it did feel that they were in just too deep.
Embarrass the King. So correct me if I make a mistake, okay?
I'll try.
The Guardian reporting, which was, or at least looked exemplary last week, that presented a fairly binary case whereby you either pass or fail, and he failed, but he got the job anyway. That perhaps informs the behaviour of Downing Street at the end of last week, which was to pass the buck all the way to Ollie Robbins and, in Keir Starmer's case, to sack him. Today, and it's only 10:15, so this will probably change in the course of the morning, it is no longer a binary case of either failing or succeeding. That vetting process, it was nuanced or balanced, or there was not a black-white, yes-no binary answer to it. And Ollie Robbins, as is his wont, and indeed his responsibility, took a view that the concerns expressed were not sufficient for him to stymie the appointment, that the Foreign Office, I think the phrase he used, could manage whatever risks, as yet unspecified, had been identified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what it looks like to me now is that Downing Street overreacted last week because the story, and we're all guilty of this, or at least I am, because the story looks so huge and so awful, but it doesn't look that huge and that awful now, therefore the sacking of Ollie Robbins looks unfair.
I think the sacking of Ollie Robbins, many MPs will say definitely is unfair. And I think if you've listened to his testimony today, lots of people will have a lot of sympathy with him.
Yes.
But yes, the Guardian's reporting last week was potentially a bit simplistic in the way that they said that he had failed the vetting. So Ollie Robbins said today, I don't recall that we understand that is what the UK security vetting concluded. He had, again, not seen it, but what he did say was that he thought that the UK security vetting had recommended that he not get this clearance. That was a recommendation. And of course, it was his decision.
So back up again, say that bit again.
That Ollie Robbins had been said today, he said, I don't recall that he had said anywhere that it said denied. Right. He said, I don't recall that we understand that is what the UK security vetting had concluded. And he said he had not read the security vetting note. He had not ever seen a security vetting note, which had basically, apparently, has a box where it either says, we recommend that they pass or not pass. And then it says a level of concern. It's green, amber or red. And in that, it says whether they have a level of medium concern, high concern or no concern. That is what Ollie Robbins was talking about when he was asked about this. And he said, I didn't see that document, but I was under the impression that it had been recommended by the UK security vetting that he had, quotes, high concern, and the recommendation from this body was that he should not get clearance. However, Ollie Robbins went on to say, I was very confident. I spoke to officials. I had lots of meetings about this. And they all said, we believe the mitigations, we think, can be mitigated and that everything will be okay.
He did know this bloke, but he doesn't know him anymore, or he was on his yacht, but he hasn't seen him for 10 years, or so. Or this geezer was fairly clean when Mandelson was knocking around with him, but he's a sanctioned oligarch now. These are entirely theoretical proposals and suggestions. I mean, you could own Chelsea Football Club back in the day without causing any problems, and now you would be sanctioned.
Well, exactly. And you say, why did Lord Mandelson, was he able to why do we need to vet him again when he was vetted in government? Well, actually, because he set up a company called Global Counsel after he left government. And I think, and many people in government are speculating that is the reason why he potentially failed the security vetting, is because of some of those clients which had links to China and had links to Russia. And that is the speculation at the heart of why this all failed. But yes, exactly.
At which point he simply says, I'm doing Jimmy Carter with my peanut farm. I'm having absolutely nothing to do with Global Counsel for the duration of my tenure as ambassador.
Yes, and also other mitigations that the Foreign Office can put in place include basically saying, well, actually, if the ambassador needs to see these top secret security files to do with Russia or China, he could simply not be shown them. He could simply be shown a summary of them, for example. And actually, we won't make him involved in any of this really top-level decisions because we keep him out of it. If we think there is any risk of national security, we just will not show him these documents.
So who did something wrong?
That's a really good question.
In fact, you're right. It is a really good question. 0345 6060973 is the. No, I'm going to make you answer it. You can't leave the studio. Who actually did something wrong? Which is a wonderful way into the question of how big this story actually is and why it has felt so enormous until roughly 10 past 10 yesterday. Who did something wrong? You don't have to answer if you can't.
Look, I think if I were in Sir Ollie Robbins' shoes, I think I would have wanted to let somebody else know this. He insists that he shouldn't have done so.
But if he's saying...
He is saying, I should not have done so. Yeah. But it never says anywhere in the law, and I've looked at the law, I've looked at the Civil Service Code, I can't see anything that precludes him from saying to either
He's not forbidden or compelled to say it, so it's his judgment.
It's his judgment. But equally, do I think he's a great civil servant? I think he's handled this whole thing incredibly well. Yes, I do. And I totally believe his account of that
he's the enemy within, according to Nigel Farage's 2019 version, but of course he's a paragon of virtue according to Nigel Farage's 2026 version.
Yeah. And look, I think Sir Keir Starmer, potentially, needed a fall guy, right? And that is what we've seen with Sir Ollie Robbins.
He needed a fall guy last Friday. I don't know that he needs a fall guy today. But it's too late for Ollie Robbins.
I think he did need a fall guy. I think he needed to take the blame for something. And, we talk about other ministerial resignations. Yeah. We talk about Amber Rudd, who, said, I was handed the wrong information by my officials, but I'm still going to resign as Home Secretary anyway. Previous sort of cabinet ministers have resigned over far less. And they have blamed, some blame officials and some choose not to. And Keir Starmer has always said that he's a guy that doesn't do that and he doesn't want to do that. But he has done in this case. I think...
But what was failed? I'm writing down questions as you speak.
He's saying I should have been told and it's wrong that I wasn't told.
In which case it is somebody else's fault, not his. Well, it's not his fault somebody didn't tell him something.
No, and so he says it's up to the Foreign Office or Sir Ollie Robbins or somebody else to tell him. Obviously, we heard lots of questions from MPs yesterday in the House of Commons, including Joe Abbott, who said, well, mate, why didn't you ask? Why didn't you press these people a bit further? We heard from Nick Thomas-Symonds yesterday who says there's much more about this to come out. We're nowhere near the end of this. Is this important?
God save us.
It is important. This goes to the heart of government. There's lots of questions for us about how government works.
It's very, very interesting.
But it brings into question...
It brings into question... about 100 messages saying, no, it isn't. Talk about parking tickets.
I think it's interesting for a number of reasons because the Prime Minister is so on the ropes anyway. It brings into question his judgment. The PM promised to be so much better on these issues. It's not great to be questioning whether the Prime Minister is telling the truth or not. On the other hand, MPs think Starmer is on the way out anyway. They
Yes.
think this is not what's going to push him out. The vetting process, as you say, is incredibly confusing. It is about the minutiae of government politics, and it's very hard to follow.
It was confusing on Friday. I thought it was really straightforward.
It's totally
on Friday.
not.
I thought it was, has he passed? No, he hasn't. Well, how the hell could he have gone to Washington DC? Heads must roll. And yet, the more we learn, the more it appears that is, as you say, a simplistic analysis of a situation.
Yeah.
So 3 questions I've written down while you've been talking.
Let's go.
Who actually did something wrong? Mm-hmm. What was failed in the context of vetting?
So does fail mean not passed?
I don't know. Don't make me write down another question.
I think that's a
Nothing was
question
failed.
B.
Failed. Like literally red flagged saying.
Well, we don't know. We've not seen this document. I don't know.
And
Ollie Robbins
therefore,
doesn't
how
know
big
either.
a deal is this? How big is this story? How serious is it? You're right about one thing. In the minds of backbench Labour MPs, it doesn't actually matter. It's the perception of chaos. That wonderful question that somebody asked, I think it was Sam Coates. Why do you always appear to be a passenger rather
That
than a
question.
driver?
Brilliant.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one for the ages, that. Why do you always appear to be a passenger rather than a driver? And now I will get attacked by the Keir Starmer can do no wrong club. But that's
What did you learn a new word on Friday? Was it
Stormtrooper? Yes,
Lovely.
which I don't know if that's a little bit unkind, but hey ho.
Yeah.
All right, we've got a phone in, I think. Who did something wrong? What was actually failed? And I mean, listen, the embarrassing bit is, I think on Friday, I perhaps got it entirely wrong, but for good reason, given that we have subsequently learned things that we didn't know on Friday.
Yeah.
Do you think he'll be back in the course of the morning? He's still there, is he?
I
Ollie
hope so,
Robbins? He's still
yeah.
talking, so there could well be things that emerge subsequent
so.
to this conversation that demand your immediate presence in the studio.
I hope so, yeah. There's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot of unanswered questions. And because we're not going to see
there's
those
some known
documents,
knowns and
some
known
known knowns and
unknowns.
some unknown
Unknown
unknowns. But yeah, look, this goes to the heart of Keir Starmer and his judgment. I think a lot of what MPs and a lot of what the public say was, well, you appointed this guy knowing his links to Jeffrey Epstein and knowing some of his slightly dodgy links to other countries already. Why did you make that decision? And I think that really goes to the heart of what people feel about this.
Yeah,
Today
but it's
might
not
feel
relevant
like
to this week's events, is it?
It's not relevant to this week's events, but it's relevant to what we think about the Prime Minister and his judgment.
Right, there we go. 24 minutes after 10. I can't really do this because it makes me sound lazy, but I'd like you to give me a ring and say something clever. 0345 6060 973. Do you need a little bit more than that to get your teeth into, or should we see whether or not that one's got legs? Give me a ring and say something clever. 0345 6060 973. Or give me a ring and say something insightful that I haven't heard already. Don't ring... That's too hard, isn't it? That's not fair. Don't ring me if your opinion regarding Keir Starmer is exactly the same today as it was before this story emerged. I'm interested in people who are thinking about things. So if you're going to use words like LIBOR or make vaguely racist comments about Diane Abbott, then you have accidentally stayed tuned to the wrong programme. So I want to hear intelligent observations, insightful observations, but also possibly accusations that either I got it horribly wrong on Friday and this is a rather small storm in a rather big teacup, or I'm getting it horribly wrong today and this is a much more important story than I am currently feeling. And feeling is the right word to use because I've shared with you my lack of understanding. I don't know who actually did something wrong anymore. I don't know what was actually failed because we are told that the vetting body thought it was a sort of borderline decision and they were leaning towards a no, but the Foreign Office in the body of Ollie Robbins felt that they could easily navigate the problems that had been raised. And because I can't answer either of those questions, my answer to the question of how big the story is currently not very, but I'm happy to hit 11 o'clock today convinced that it's actually enormous. So give me a ring and tell me it's enormous, said the actress to the bishop. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need to do any, all or none of that.
James O'Brien on LBC.
28 minutes after 10. It'd be nice to squeeze in a call, but if we haven't got time, then don't worry. I'll just run through why we're asking the questions that we're asking this morning. I don't want to over-personalise it, but if I got it wrong on Friday, then I deserve to take my medicine today. What exactly, and again, this is why the contributions of people who are not suffering from footballification are going to be a lot more interesting than the contributions of people who are. What exactly has happened here? Who has done something either egregiously or even vaguely wrong? 0345 6060 973. How have we had a conversation for 3 days about a vetting process being failed when the man in whose gift that ultimate decision was has essentially told us today it wasn't actually failed? Misgivings were expressed. The vetting body was leaning towards a no, but my judgment was that we could cope with the misgivings that they had raised. And then, of course, question 3 becomes, why on earth was he sacked? For doing his job, it would appear rather well. There's one fly in the ointment of this, which is when the Prime Minister was saying, well, at least I thought there was before I came on air, when the Prime Minister was saying in Parliament that everything has been done above board and everything was hunky-dory and he passed this and he passed that, should not somebody at that point have had a word in his shell like? Should not somebody at that point have said, you need to know this, it wasn't quite as cut and dried as you are saying? It was actually Ollie Robbins' judgment call. It wasn't like a green light from the vetting body. It was Ollie Robbins using his judgment to decide that things could go ahead, in which case I still don't know who has actually done something wrong. And the idea that the Prime Minister has been lying, I think, has been rendered actually ridiculous. 2 MPs got slung out of the House of Commons yesterday, one from the left, one from the far right, for alleging, or the very right, or the right, or whatever it is that 30p Lee describes himself as these days, because he's been in more parties than, I don't know, Ronald McDonald. But the point being that the idea he was lying has just disappeared over the horizon. He didn't know what was going on. And that, I still feel in my water. That's bad, right? Is it naive to say he should have known more? Diane Abbott saying he should have asked more questions. What questions? And who of? Can we send Peter Mandelson to Washington? Yes, we can. Are you sure? Yeah, of course. What? Tell me more. Question something. Dear, blee. What? I don't know. What? Give me the smoking gun. Tell me what has been done and who did it that's wrong. Oh, come on. More parties than Boris Johnson during COVID. Why did I go with Ronald McDonald? It's been in more parties than Boris Johnson. Actually, can we rewind that, Keith? Can we cut that out of the catch-up version and I'll do the joke now. I don't know what 30p Lee calls himself these days. All I know is that he's been to more parties than Boris Johnson had in Downing Street during COVID. Here's Dominic Ellis with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 10:34. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Listen, one of the great tragedies of recent years, and I think this would have popped into my head even if it hadn't been for the hideous spectre of 30p Lee appearing in my consciousness, is that we have started treating opinions that have no basis with the same level as opinions that have a basis, right? You know what I'm going to cite as the mothership of this, or the best example of this, so I don't even need to say it out loud. But people who understand nothing, or people who understood nothing, being treated by everybody from the BBC down as an equal and opposite force to people who understood everything. Emily Maitlis has called it the Minford paradigm, whereby during conversations about imminent departure or staying in the European Union, producers across the board would be absolutely inundated with qualified experts, economists and business experts explaining why it was an absolutely stupid idea, but they'd have to book someone to say that it was a brilliant idea, and they could only ever find one person, a curious chap called Patrick Minford, and he would pop up all over the place because producers couldn't find anybody else with the requisite job title or letters after their name to argue that Brexit was actually a good idea. So you end up with this hideous scenario where people with strong opinions and no understanding, one thinks of Andrea Leadsom, John Redwood, 30p Lee, Mark Francois, are offered up as equal and opposite forces to people with less strong opinions but a lot more understanding. And there you get your sort of typical Remainer centrist. So today, if you are adamant that Keir Starmer's done something awful, I don't really respect your opinion until you justify it to me. So I want you to tell me why this is awful. Do you see what I mean? I think Idiot's Corner is a bit too busy at the moment. I'm not just going to put you in Idiot's Corner for sending a barely literate message using words like LIBOR and Starmer is a lie, because you have to back it up. And I know that not everybody asks you to do that, when you're on Facebook or social media. You never have to do that. You can just shout stuff. It's the kind of intellectual equivalent of sticking a flag on a lamppost. You don't really have to understand anything or justify it or explain it. You can just nurture a sense of grievance and shout even more loudly when people start asking you questions. But there must be strong arguments for why Starmer should be in the place that I thought he was in on Friday. I just can't quite see them today myself. 0345 6060 973. Who did something wrong? What did they do wrong? And if you can't answer either of those questions, how the hell have we ended up talking about this as if it was akin to the end of civilization as we know it? Balama is in Lambeth. It's not like you to ring me up on domestic political issues.
Exactly, James. And I thought about this quite a lot before ringing. And
good. I always value your insights.
No, thank you. And it's an issue that wasted 1 week of all of ours. So I thought I would ring because it finally turned out to be a non-issue.
Do you think so?
Yeah, it's a complete non-issue. We just ended up wasting a complete week discussing a non-issue because this whole situation arose with a newspaper reporting that this guy had failed the vetting process, but it turns out that it's not a binary fail or pass situation, that it was arranged and that the concerns were presented to the Sir Robbins, who then, he said he was told that they were leaning towards denying vetting, but that there had been mitigation measures put in place to take care of the concerns that were uncovered. And then he said, okay, let's grant vetting, let's grant clearance. Now, so if anyone did anything wrong, it was the Guardian who started by presenting this issue as a binary fail or pass process. Number 10 should have tried to understand the process and should have nuanced it over the past week, but they didn't do that. It is either they didn't understand the process themselves or they did understand, but they understood that being nuanced cannot cut it, especially because the tabloids have latched onto it. And then you have opposition leaders calling Keir Starmer a liar. Now it turns out that they are the liars because Kemi insisted that Keir Starmer knew. He said, I didn't know. Now Sir Robin says...
There's no way he could have known. There's no way he could have known.
Yeah, and to be honest, it was wrong for Keir Starmer to have sacked him, but it's good now on Keir Starmer that someone he sacked a few days ago is vindicating him, saying he didn't know. Because I can tell you, Kemi would have come out and said, oh, this is under Keir Starmer's employment and therefore we cannot trust him.
Yes, that's why it is a contempt of Parliament, of course, to accuse people of lying in the chamber, as Zara Sultana and 12p Lee discovered yesterday. But I think they were both grandstanding from different ends of the political spectrum. I've got a horrible feeling, Balama, and I'm not asking you to be my father confessor on this, but it is you to whom I will make this confession. I've got a horrible feeling that my own position was probably skewed by the fact that it was the Guardian doing the reporting. If it had been one of the organs that is hideously and violently opposed to everything Keir Starmer ever does, up to and including buying a field for his disabled mother to keep donkeys in, I probably wouldn't have attributed quite so much fire to all the smoke. But because it was the Guardian on Friday, I thought this must be gangbusters.
In all honesty, this description applies to me as well, James. When I read it on The Guardian, I thought, they must have gone through this very well. And maybe they also didn't understand the whole system. But then yesterday, James, Keir Starmer's major theme was not asking whether Mendelssohn passed vetting. He says, I wasn't told, but he should have asked. But James, there are hundreds of fantastic journalists in the UK. No one has ever asked that question, did he pass vetting? Because it wasn't an issue. It wasn't something someone can foresee unless if you have some supernatural powers.
And this is where the Epstein thing has been unhelpful, isn't it? And I don't mean that in a mild sense. I think it is still something that Keir Starmer will have to answer for when he gets to the pearly gates. How on earth you could have sent a close friend of a paedophile to Washington to be ambassador? That's a different issue. And I think probably there was a little bit of, I don't know what you would call it, compensation going on. So those of us who hadn't called that out for the aberration that it clearly is, because we were caught up in the moment of saying, oh, what a clever idea to send a snake to Washington because the man in the White House speaks fluent snake. People were almost making up for their failure to condemn the original appointment by bringing it into their contemplation of the revelations on Friday, which had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, but most people, I would say, I didn't know it didn't have anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein until this morning. And of course, yesterday, like I said, we were saying he didn't ask specifically whether he passed the vetting. But Kemi Badenoch, her duty is to ask questions in Parliament. She never asked this question before the whole revelation came, but we were expecting Keir Starmer to be some supernatural and ask those questions. And to be honest, James, I think this saga speaks to the broader system of UK politics, which is built on looking for anything to ask the Prime Minister to resign.
I even said that on Friday. I even said we've got addicted to the merry-go-round, we've got addicted to the chaos, and yet I didn't think that I was falling into the trap of indulging those impulses and being part of that problem. Bulama, thank you. Listen, I find Bulama's contributions to this programme absolutely incredible, but no one is infallible. If you want to challenge anything that he's said or anything that I've said, 03456060973 is the number that you need. Or if you want to really hit harder on that question of what exactly he has done wrong, or rather, what anybody has done wrong on this case, because the story is not what we thought it was last week. And I think there are probably more revelations coming from Ollie Robbins as he continues to give evidence to that committee. So Natasha will bring us up to speed with those as and when appropriate. But before that, Claire is in York. Claire, what would you like to say?
Oh, James.
Oh, Claire,
James.
Claire.
I love you, but I've been very, very cross with you.
Go on.
And Palama has hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think the media some parts of the media have been purposely skewing the narrative, and the response has been obediently hysterical about this. And, if officials are given important tasks to do on behalf of the government and then they bring their conclusions to the Prime Minister, it shouldn't be on the Prime Minister to then doubt and second-guess every single official and say to them, are you sure you're telling me the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? He should be able to trust officials who we pay as taxpayers to pay them to do these jobs. I mean, otherwise, every decision people are given to do are going to then be second guessed, and we can't trust anyone who does work on behalf of the government to bring to the Prime Minister. And I for one was very impressed yesterday. I mean, Keir Starmer, I've never heard any leader ever say this, and I can't imagine anyone ever saying it again. He stood up in Parliament and said that he was very sorry, and that he had made a mistake, and that it was his fault, and that he apologised to the Epstein survivors for his mistake. And I thought that was very brave. And I think we've also forgotten that Boris Johnson put the son of a Russian KGB spy in the Lords, and the intelligence advised against it, and there was no hysteria about that, no hysteria whatsoever.
No, I don't know about. I mean, you're right, and it's important to bear that in mind. But it doesn't exonerate or excuse Starmer, because the whole point for many of us was that he was going to signal an end to that sort of
but what has
shenanigans.
He done wrong? What's he done wrong?
That's the phone in. You can't ring in and repeat the question, Claire.
I'm saying, we all understand.
What has he done wrong?
Well, for one thing, there was Trump as a president, and I think out of desperation, he knew what trouble that could cause our country.
So we need to get our man who's got questionable
get
associations and historic crossovers. There's a Venn diagram there. Unfortunately, it's a Venn diagram with Jeffrey Epstein's name all over it, but Trump and Mandelson are both in the intersection. So I hope that wasn't part of the thinking, but it probably was.
And I think it was a mistake in hindsight. Well, I mean, even at the time, it was a mistake. But I can understand why he did it, and he didn't do it out of some loyalty to some Russian spy. He did it not out of loyalty to Mandelson. He did it out of loyalty to the country.
Because he thought that would be good for the country. He might have been wrong, and I suppose in the final analysis, events revealed that he was wrong. But
and he admitted he was wrong. He admitted in Parliament to everyone, apologised to the survivors. Most importantly, he apologised to the Epstein survivors,
yes,
which I thought was very powerful. He totally saw where the real crime of that choice was, and it was to the Epstein survivors more than anyone.
But it was his choice. I mean, I don't know quite how many parsnips his apology would actually butter in that case, because it's a bit late, isn't it? And he still made the appointment in the first place. But that question of what is wrong, I think I've got an answer to it, Claire. I'm going to read you an abusive text to me, and then I'm going to introduce you to what that world is like a bit, because you've prompted some responses yourself. This is from Ryan. James O'Brien, you are the most repulsive, arrogant, and insufferable weasel I've ever listened to in my life. As you have mentioned, you cannot call Starmer a liar without sufficient evidence. However, you can strongly suspect he has been in the know of the facts, says Ryan, without any evidence. However, he specifically requested to appoint Mandelson to the position despite knowing his connections to a paedophile. What is wrong with you? And that's the point, isn't it? In that some people, bless them, are not actually understanding the fact that this conversation has nothing to do with the original appointment of Mandelson, which everyone thought was brilliant until everyone thought it was appalling. It's on the question of vetting that has absolutely nothing to do with Epstein. So in questions of what did he do wrong, he appointed Mandelson as ambassador is right and wrong at the same time. It's right in the sense that he never should have appointed him. It's wrong in the sense of that it has anything at all to do with this particular story, this element. And for your introduction to the world of Idiot's Corner, 2 messages came in at 10:46 while you were talking. One said, Claire is spot on. He did do the right thing. Hurrah for my fellow York citizen, says Hannah. Whereas JJ has been in touch to say, this woman is demented.
Oh, well, you know.
Welcome to my world, Claire. It's 10:48.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:51. So I am going through my inbox this morning even more carefully than I usually do, because I'm looking for a really cogent argument expressing where I was on Friday, supporting where I was on Friday, that Keir Starmer has done something awful. I'm not currently convinced that you can sustain that position in the light of the events that have subsequently emerged. But so I fully appreciate not everybody wants to ring in. But I've just spent that last break really, really, really trying to find somebody who sounds like they have, like, I don't know, an IQ in at least double figures, arguing that Keir Starmer is either a liar or has done something wrong, or that it's easy to point at what he's got. And I have got absolutely nothing. It's 10:52, so if you want to be that person before 11 o'clock, then there is room for you to do it. Well, ring in, actually, 03456060973. If you don't want to ring, use the same number to WhatsApp or text me. So this has come in. And there's bizarrely, every word begins with a capital letter, but that probably just means it's dictated. How typical, you being the only numpty in the UK that can't see that 2-tier. So you see what I mean? If you're going to use phrases like 2-tier Keir or LIBOR, then, I mean, by all means, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me unlikely that you're thinking very deeply about things, let alone this thing. But on we go. 2-tier is a blatant liar, but hey-ho, he will take us back to your beloved EU. And then Eleanor has written, do not read out the last word, which is a word being used to describe me that rhymes with Dick Littlejohn's first name. And there it is. I mean, that is it. It's just sort of angry dope. In fact, let's have a little look at his history as well, because I think we both know exactly what we're going to find in there, don't we? Let's see what... So this is the kind of person... And in his defence, he's shouting in similar fashion, up to and including the capital letters, to the Daily Mail and some commentators on Friday, less so today. can't find the blooming history button on this to see what other aperçus and words of wisdom he has generously shared with us in the past. But I'll rectify that situation shortly. 10:54 is the time. Back to the phones. Al's in Glasgow. What's happened here, Al?
I think this is a complete waste of time.
What, the whole show? The whole show, or just the story, or the phone in?
No, the story. No, I think Starmer should stay. I think one important issue is, did Ollie Robbins' comments contradict Starmer's yesterday?
No.
And I don't think they did.
No one does. Except our friend here, the only numpty in the UK that can't see that two-tier is a blatant liar, but of course has no evidence at all for that position. I think I saw 12p Lee being interviewed by Mark Austin being asked for his evidence, and he said, all the people in my inbox think he's a liar, therefore he's a liar. And I thought, flipping out, if 100 people send Lee Anderson a message saying that the earth is flat and that cornflakes are made of gold, it's going to be a very interesting PMQs next week, isn't it? But anyway, carry on, Al. What do you think has happened?
Well, I think for that reason alone, this thing should just be, dealt with. But I think one factor that's not really mentioned a lot is that number 10 has to factor in a political urgency in appointing Mandelson, because he could influence Trump. And I think people are focusing a little bit too much on the who said what, to whom. And I think that's not the... Starmer is also under a great deal of pressure, and I think that's one of the examples. Because the example... the relationship between Trump and the UK really affects our security and our economic health.
And at the time, it was believed that the appointment might ameliorate that relationship, or that he could be appeased, or he could be dealt with. And of course, we now know that was up to and including the state visit to Windsor Castle. It's simply not true, is it? It was probably a waste of time. But that's it. We're back to that original breakthrough moment, which is the reason why it was such an appalling appointment. Is the same reason why it was so widely celebrated as a brilliant appointment in the first place. Thank you, Al. I'm still, I mean this genuinely, searching for a really powerful argument in support of the idea that this is awful and that Starmer or someone has done something absolutely awful. But here you go. I found the history of the fella saying, you're the only numpty in the UK that can't see that two-tier is a blatant lie. I don't know if this is from Lee Anderson or not, but it's certainly from the sort of person who sent Lee Anderson messages that he thinks means that Keir Starmer is a liar, despite the fact he's got absolutely... Here you go. So the ethnic makeup of these kids says it all. I think you get an idea of the kind of person sending messages such as this. Here's another one. OK, O'Brien, explain why ADHD is only recognised in the UK and the USA and not in your beloved Europe. No one cares. Why don't you talk about the Pakistani grooming gangs? Bored of you talking about Trump. So I think this is the kind of person that is convinced that Keir Starmer has lied. And as I said at the beginning of this segment of the programme, this last 10 years in this country has allowed people who don't understand anything to think that their opinions are worth as much as the people who understand everything. It is probably the darkest and longest shadow cast by Brexit. I said it would happen, and it has. Natasha Clark is back because Ollie Robbins is still giving evidence to Emily Thornberry's committee, and that means you have. He has said something interesting.
Yes, James, that's right. I always think it's really funny when politicians swear in Parliament, especially when obviously many news broadcasters, as we know, are taking their streams live. Now, we won't be obviously playing you some of the unparliamentary language that Emily Thornberry has been saying earlier today, but Ollie Robbins has in the last hour or so been asked about a report. It was first reported from Sam Coates at Sky News that Morgan McSweeney, then the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, reportedly called Philip Barton, who is Robinson's predecessor as head of the Foreign Office, asking him to speed up the Mandelson vetting approval. So this would have been before Ollie Robbins came into the post, so at some point in December, probably, of 2024. Now, we don't exactly know when that was, but apparently McSweeney reportedly told Barton this.
Going back to the point where Sir Philip was still permanent Under-Secretary, it is reported by, I think it's Sam Coates, that the Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff, rang Sir Philip and said, in terms stronger than those that I can use before the watershed.
I think you should.
Well, I'll just say that it was just to prove it with terms stronger than that. Does that accord with your impression?
Just prove it.
Does it accord with your impression when you took over from Sir Philip?
I think I recall Philip saying to me, certainly Philip's handover to me has contributed to my strong sense that there was an atmosphere of pressure and a certain dismissiveness about this DV process, which I hope I've tried already to be honest with the committee about. I don't remember Philip using those words. Also, I'm proud to say Philip's probably not the sort of person who would report them verbatim.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's good, and it speaks of that thing that we talked about earlier in Downing Street, whether it is unseemly pressure to pass it or just a kind of complacency, thinking he's already a Privy Councillor. How long can it really take?
Yeah, and look, you heard from Sir Ollie at the very beginning of that session and the audio that we played before with him basically saying that the pressure was relentless when he got into the job. From essentially that point onwards, Number 10 were pressuring him and pressuring the FCO generally. We also hear as well, Robbins telling the committee that he was asked by someone in Number 10 to find a job for Matthew Doyle. You'll remember he was the Prime Minister's former Director of Communications. He then was given a peerage to sit in the House of Lords. That's obviously now been removed after his links to campaigning for a known sex offender. And Ollie Robbins said that he was asked at the time, it was serious enough for the Number 10 private office to ring up the head of the diplomatic service and ask for a forward look of available head of mission jobs. He also said at the time that he was told not to tell the Foreign Secretary. So the idea of these two pieces of information, James, is that he's trying to paint this picture of Number 10 and essentially people in Keir Starmer's private office doing things a little bit pressuringly, maybe they shouldn't be doing.
There's another buck pass there as well, isn't there? Because Doyle became a controversial figure after it emerged that he had stayed friends and indeed campaigned for a character whose name temporarily eludes, Sean Morton, a former Labour councillor who admitted indecent child image offences in 2017. Sunday Times reported that he had campaigned for Morton after he had been charged with possessing and distributing indecent images. Not convicted, but still charged. And Starmer's defence, or at least his spokesperson's defence, was, wait for it, that Doyle did not give a full account over his links with a convicted sex offender. I mean, the problem is that these defences may be true, but one is too many. Two is terrible.
And that's exactly what everybody was making the case for when the Lord Doyle story came around. Like I say, he was given a peerage, he was put in the House of Lords, he was spoken debates, etc. And it was only several months later that we found out about this news. And obviously it brings up questions for Sir Keir Starmer, but also questions again about this whole very difficult vetting process and who knows who knew what, when. And like I say, it just makes things incredibly difficult. But what those two bits say, I think, is just that there were people in Number 10, according to Sir Ollie, and he is absolutely
there were
them.
people in
there were people in Number 10. He doesn't want to name them. In Keir Starmer's
McSweeney, isn't it?
Well, he's talking about the private office. That wouldn't be Morgan McSweeney then. He's obviously named Morgan McSweeney as part of that conversation there. But he's also talking about people in Keir Starmer's private office who says were calling him up and putting pressure on him to make some very, very big decisions.
Get it over and done with. Honestly, are you more or less clear about exactly what has happened at 11:02 today than you were at 9:02?
No, I think I'm more clear.
I'm more clear. I may get you back on there. I'm not. I'll tell you that for nothing.
James O'Brien on LBC.
We start the hour with a missing word round, something to sort of nibble away in the back of your brain while we get stuck into the next conversation. This is a good one. Blank, hooked on coke. No, I've done it wrong, haven't I? Can we rewind? Can we delete? No, stop it. Stop it. Can we pretend that never happened? Right, ready? Salmon, hooked on blank. Stop laughing at me. Everybody makes mistakes. No, look, it's not like I'm Prime Minister. Anyway, I was clearly told that this headline had been vetted and passed. Salmon, hooked on blank. I've got a feeling you might get this one right. Salmon hooked on blank. Swim twice as far. Ooh, what could that be? Ooh, this is a good one, isn't it? This is a good music. Salmon hooked on blank. Swim twice as far. Do you think you can work out what that one is? No, Matt, it's not sausages. Salmon. What was the one, Keith, that I got? Was that Was it root? What was it? Cauliflower, yeah. It's not cauliflower either. Salmon hooked on blank, swim twice as far. Yeah, well done. A few people extraordinarily guessing that one correctly, which is, a testament to just how intelligent the listeners to this programme are. Although not one really powerful... what's the word I want? In fact, not one even vaguely sensible attempt at trying to explain exactly what it is that Keir Starmer has done wrong in the context of this vetting story. Nobody now disputes the fact that he got something pretty wrong, deeply wrong, with the original appointment of Mandelson. But that's, and I don't mean this to sound condescending, but that's a completely different proposition and a completely different conversation. I've got two texts that came in while I was searching for people making powerful arguments against Starmer, and there isn't one. Make of that what you will. It doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means that if you said to people, could you provide some evidence or could you back that up or explain yourself, they would not be able to. And in my slightly unfashionable view, if you can't back up your opinion, or you can't explain your opinion, or you can't provide evidence for the thing that you profess to believe, you shouldn't be taken seriously. Unfortunately, you can become the President of the United States of America and quite possibly Prime Minister of this country in the not-too-distant future, while being a patron saint of people who have extremely strong opinions but understand nothing. So these two texts came in. I searched for something different and found these, and I think they sum up rather perfectly the last hour, and in fact the first hour of yesterday's show, and possibly all 3 hours of Friday's show as well. This from Craig, I wish I'd come up with myself. In its simplest terms, James, what we've been led to believe is a Partygate moment now appears to be another Currygate moment. That's very good, isn't it? Anthony says, it's not the Guardian's fault, is it? Because it seems as if nobody understood what was going on here apart from Ollie Robbins. And this I completely agree with. And this is why I'm afraid all the people sending me messages saying, thank goodness you've seen the light, I can't believe you joined in all the attacks on Keir Starmer, are going to start being cross with me again. This is absolutely true, in my opinion. Listening to the professionalism and elan of Ollie Robbins today, Starmer's greatest crime here will turn out to be sacking a clearly able and essential high-ranking civil servant. And doing so, I think, in a fit of pique. But that's enough about that. I want to turn your attention next to a story that it sometimes feels as if we have talked about a million times on the programme. And that's possibly because, at least in metaphorical terms, we probably have. Do you know, I can let you into a little secret. My youngest turns 18 this week. That's how long I have been charged with the enormous privilege of spending time with you every morning. Both of my children, in the course of our time together, have now reached their majority. That's it, isn't it? It's great. No one told me this, apparently. When you're a parent, when both kids pass 18, that's it. They never need any more money off you. They never need any more help, support. I'm going to rent out their rooms. It's going to be great. I'm going to be minted not having to pick up the bills for my... Yeah, all right, I'm joking. But I mentioned that partly because the passage of time is always interesting, isn't it? But also because I sat here, I was about to say not long ago, but it is a long time ago, and very arrogantly, but I hope not in a Weasley fashion, I very arrogantly contended before my children were of the relevant age that I would never give them screens until they were, I don't know, about 40. And I remember when we fell, actually. I think I was too embarrassed to tell you for a while. We fell on a holiday. We did a long drive holiday, you know, when you sort of drive to France or something like that, to going right. So I can't remember even where we were going. And we bought a couple of, what are they called? Not iPads, tablets, so that they could watch Peppa Pig in the back of the car while we were driving. And it was absolutely incredible. Having had previous experience of the journeys where children are in the back of the car asking every 17 seconds, I think is the rule, isn't it? Every 17 seconds, are we there yet? 17 or 18, depending on, how old they are. But having dealt with that, and of course arguing and impatience and hungry, and the one thing that screens don't do is handle toilet stops or change nappies or anything like that. But I think they were about 8 and 6, maybe slightly younger, when I can't remember whether we bought them especially or whether... No, I think we redeployed our own iPad to put Peppa Pig on in the back of the car, and it bought us 2 or 3 hours of peace. And that was the polar opposite of what I had told you I would do. And listen, I wasn't as entirely authentic back then as I am now because I hadn't discovered the power of therapy. But I did generally tell you the truth. I always tried to tell you the truth. I certainly meant it when I said it. There's no way I'm letting my children have screens, tablets. Smartphones weren't really a thing on the scale that they are now at this point. But I just thought, no. I don't know why I thought that, except that it's modernity and they should do what I do, which was sit in the back of the car trying to read, getting motion sickness and puking everywhere in the back of my dad's Morris Marina. That's generally what my attitude was on these sort of... So why shouldn't my children be getting motion sickness while trying to read and then puking all over the back of the Zafira? I just mentioned that because the swing of the pendulum is so acute. I'm pretty sure that I was also adamant that they wouldn't get smartphones I wonder when it happened. I wonder if anyone was paying more attention to me than I was at the time. Certainly, they didn't get phones when they were at primary school, but by the time they arrived at secondary school, certainly one of them needed a phone. Otherwise, she wouldn't have known what lesson she had next if she didn't have a phone on which all of that information and detail was contained. And we've done the moral panic, haven't we? We've done everything is going to be the end of civilization as we know it until it isn't. Turns out video didn't kill the radio star. Hello. But all of the other things that were supposed to signal the end of civilization as we know it have turned out not to. I personally believe that social media will turn out to be the exception to that rule. I don't think we're going to look back in 10 years' time and think, oh, what were we all so worried about with regard to social media and children's access to it? But again, I could be wrong. I don't think I've ever signed up for a moral panic in the way that more right-wing leaning commentators often tend to. But they're just in the business of making you angry and scared. It's how they keep their oligarch paymasters in power. I'm not in the business of making you angry and scared about things that aren't real. I'm in the business of making you angry and scared about things that are real. So I don't think I've joined in any moral panics previously, certainly not the one regarding video games, far from it. But I do think social media is going to turn out to be an exception. I do think the damage that it is doing to young people, many, many young people, not to mention old people, but we can legislate for young people, is kind of the stuff of a Philip Larkin poem. But I was fairly adamant that my children wouldn't have them until they did. I'm still a bit, you can probably hear a little echo of that slightly touchy character that I used to be when parents ring in with younger children and very confidently assert that they won't do X or Y. And it's a sort of combination of, I don't know, embarrassment and also sententiousness that creeps in sometimes because you're sort of thinking, yes, you will, mate. Just you wait until they're the only one in the class that hasn't got a phone or the only one in the school that hasn't got access. And you kind of know that for all but the, can I say the strangest parents, or would that make me part of the problem that I'm trying to describe? But let's just be nice and let's say, but for all but the most resolute parents, you will eventually bend and allow your child to partake fully in the 21st century. But we're here today. It's happened. Schools will be forced to ban smartphones after a surprise government policy change. I don't think it would be too cynical to suggest that they needed a positive headline this week, and at first glance, this is one. At the moment, you get non-statutory guidance that states schools should be mobile-free, but does not stipulate how this should be done. A lot of the phone-ins that we have together are illuminating and even, dare I say, occasionally important. Today, I hope it is both of those things, but I'm happy just for informative as well. The rules as they currently stand offer schools the opportunity to ban from the premises. You're literally not allowed to bring it anywhere. You have to leave it at home. That seems to me to be potentially foolish. We'll examine these more closely together. You hand in the devices on arrival and they get locked away, which doesn't seem to me to be particularly different from the outright ban from having them on the premises at all. Then you've got option 3, which is like Victorians used to say about children themselves, they should never, they should be seen but not heard. That goes further. Phones should never be seen or heard. So you can have them in your pocket, but you can't take it out of your pocket, as it were. I think that was probably adequate. House of Lords yesterday witnessed an announcement that they were going to go further with an outright ban on smartphones in schools. And I want you to tell me, as a teacher in the first instance, if I'm lucky enough to have your attention during morning break, as a parent, or indeed as a former child. And that may sound like a silly phrase, but it isn't, because there'll be people listening to this programme for whom smartphones were absolutely required equipment during your school days. The idea of an outright ban seems to me to be too much too late. 15% of schools ban or lock them away. 80% of schools rely on the never used, seen or heard policy. I just wonder whether or not this is necessary, and if so, why? How hard is it? I mean, there's loads of questions here. How big an issue is this when you're in a school? And an outright ban. So I remember when I was on my high horse telling parents that they shouldn't give their child a smartphone, one of the frequent refrains that came back at me was that I'm worried about them being abducted. I've given my child, genuinely, I don't know if you were around at the time, I used to get loads of dads in particular telling me that their child had a smartphone, and I was an arrogant fool for saying that they shouldn't have one because they were worried about their child being abducted. And, I mean, you don't want to make light of a fear like that because it's a pretty serious one. But I do remember pointing out that if someone was abducting your child, they'd probably throw the phone in a hedge quite early in the abduction process. And I kind of look at a ban like this and have a less serious but a similar thought. If you're not allowed to take it out of your pocket, do you really need to ban them? And if they're not allowed to have them on them at all, then the emergency element of a phone is completely lost. So I have swung like a pendulum on this, from being adamant that no child should have one to defending to the hilt the decision to let my children have them because everybody else had them and they needed them. Had the curriculum on it, had their timetable on it, their lunch menu and stuff. There was an app that we could access. And I mean, I remember being told they don't need a phone to do that. They can use the tablet that is also part of their school equipment. But the tablet could also contain all of the things that you're worried about them having access to via a phone. I just want a yes or no. Let's do it binary. Let's have a binary conversation in the way that the vetting of Peter Mandelson turned out not to be binary at all. Obviously, this programme being this programme, I want you to give me the why of what you believe. Do you approve of this ban? Outright, no questions asked, stick it in a bucket or leave it at home. No child in a state primary or secondary school will be allowed to have access to a smartphone for the duration of the school day. Yes or no? Good or bad? Yay or nay? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need.
James O'Brien on LBC.
2 minutes after 11. I don't know whether AI could do this already, but the problem is that I can't force you to answer. But I do find myself sometimes when I'm waiting to throw open the phone lines after one of my interminable introductions, I do find myself thinking in a strangely and uncharacteristically scientific way. For example, I would love to know whether people for whom smartphones were a presence during their school days, as a homogenous group, respond differently from those of us for whom smartphones were but a dim and distant future prospect when we were at school. Do you see what I mean? If I could, and it doesn't count, I can't do it with my phones and my texts because I can't get a proper sample. You are self-selecting by definition. I don't know whether you realised that when you started listening to this programme, but you are a self-selecting sample. It doesn't mean we agree about everything, but it means I can't guarantee, like an opinion pollster has to do, that my sample is accurate, that it properly reflects society as a whole. But I'm fascinated to know whether people young enough to have had smartphones in school are going to move as a block, not unanimously, obviously, but as a majority, are going to move differently from generations that did not have smartphones in schools. But I don't currently see any way in which I could do that. Emma is in Grimsby. Emma, what made you pick up the phone?
Oh, good morning, James. Yeah,
Hello.
first-time caller. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous.
It's only me. It's only me. Carry on.
I was just saying to researcher that I was in the same sort of thought as yourself. Why do children at this age need phones? However, my son is at 10 years old. He's now due to go to secondary school a year in September.
Yes.
And we're having the battle at the moment about what do we do about a phone. Now, the primary school that he's at is an excellent school that we don't have any issues, but the issue that I have is what do they do with mobile phones as they are, when they bring them onto the school ground. Now, I have seen children in the playground playing around with them before they go into
So some kids have them even before the secondary
do.
school.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And the school that he's in at the moment, I think nearly all of year 5, not just year 6, but he's in year 5 at the moment, they practically all have phones. Of course, that puts a bit of pressure on me as well as a mum, because he's getting peer pressure. Well, why don't I have a phone? Why aren't you texting me in the evening, kind of thing?
Yes.
So there's that. But actually, the school, what happens at the moment is that school, they do request that all children bring their phones to the receptionist. They all do get locked away until the end of the school day, and then they pick them up just before they go out and meet the parents. I was totally in the same camp as yourself.
Yeah.
I don't agree with phones at this age, but it may well be that media now has become a little bit more prominent, and you do listen to all these scare stories. And I'm debating: do I get him a phone as long as the school locks it away
as a security device? Almost.
As a security device, yeah.
That's what Peter in Glasgow said. He said phones are a safety device now. Everyone should have one by law.
Yeah, I don't know whether by law. I'm just thinking that as a parent,
you can't force someone to have a phone who doesn't want one, Peter.
Exactly,
can you?
yeah.
Where's your phone? Show be like that scene in The Great Escape where they're getting on the train and they say to Gordon Jackson, "Show me your papers," or something like that. Anyway, you can't force people to have a phone, but for a little. So, without scaring you, what would it help with? What are you most worried about? The boy's missed the bus, or he hasn't got his dinner money, or something.
Exactly. The boy's missed the bus. Maybe there's a little bit of an element, and this is my brain going off on one, but maybe my brain is thinking, my goodness, if he's getting to the point where now he wants to walk home from school, which isn't far from the primary school, but even still, at 10 years old, he wants to do what his older friends do. Yes. Even though it's a short distance. Am I able to use that phone that he's got to track it, make sure that he's where I think he is walking home? Has there been any difficulty? And also, I think, just for their peace of mind, that they feel safe as well, to think, do you know what, I've got a phone, Mum's not with me at the minute, but I can still call her if I need her. Yes. Although it's not going to be within the school day. On that period that they're leaving school, they don't have a parent there to pick them up anymore because they're wanting that little bit of independence, which is fine. But, just to make sure that the safety net is there, not just for the parent, but also for the child. Because my son is quite sensitive, and I think that's what he's needing at the moment. He wants to do these things, but he's also aware of the world that we live in as well, even at 10. So
I misread the 4 options that schools currently have because I'm an idiot. The first one, you don't have to agree with the second bit of that statement. Flipping out, Emma. Honestly, you've gone from being a nervous first-time caller to putting the boot in before we've even got to the half-past news. So it's either an outright ban, hand it in when you get there, lock it away yourself, or keep it in your pocket but never take it out. The outright ban, for the reasons you've just outlined, is silly.
And I think
because you need it to get to and from school. I mean, some people.
I do think at this day and age, I think that is more important. I think
especially for secondary school, 16, 17-year-olds who haven't got a phone in their pocket.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit.
Use it to pay for things.
Yeah.
I'm with
absolutely.
You. So what, you think you're going to get one, don't you, this year? I can tell.
His birthday isn't till next January, and I held off this January as he turned 10. But,
That's all right.
I'm thinking, for safety reasons, because he's wanting to experiment, trying to make his own way from home, even in year 5.
And what would you prefer for the school to do? The hand in, the lock away, or the in your pocket but never take it out?
I think the hand in and lock away, because then they've got no
it's hand in or lock away. So hand in is the school lock it away. Lock away is that he locks it away. I'm going with hand in and it gets locked away by them as my favourite.
Because I think if you leave the child to have that decision, well, it's in my phone, okay, this lesson isn't going well.
I'll just go and check it now. I'll just go and have a quick game of Call of Duty or whatever, depending on how good the phone is.
Yeah.
I'll just go and order a Deliveroo because I can't, because it's liver for dinner again. I'm just going to go and order a Deliveroo to be dropped off at the back gates or something. That's just how my mind works. I like it, and I like your thoughtfulness, Emma. Thank you. That's a sparkling debut. I don't know what you're nervous about. 29 minutes after 11 is the time. So, I mean, for me, as is often the way with extremities, I don't know if this is horseshoe theory or not, but an outright ban seems to be stupid. I use that word advisedly. But equally, keep it in your pocket but never take it out seems to me a policy dreamt up by someone who's never met a child. Or certainly has never met a child like I was. Or never met a child like most of the childs, or children if you prefer, that I've met. But to keep it in your pocket but never take it out, or turn it off, nah, come off it. It's just not, I mean, and I don't care if 80% of children would obey that rule. The 20% that don't are going to be a problem for themselves and for everybody else. 11:30 is the time. Dominic Ellis has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 33 minutes after 11. I wasn't being disingenuous when I said I needed a thoughtful and substantive explanations of why Keir Starmer is in the centre of a political storm, a real political storm, as opposed to a storm in a teacup. And neither was I being dishonest or disingenuous when I said I hadn't actually received any personally. But I don't know whether this counts as substantive or thoughtful or both. But Kemi Badenoch has shared her thoughts on Ollie Robbins' evidence. And just maybe stay your cynicism if you can. The evidence from Ollie Robbins is devastating to Keir Starmer. All right, I tried. I stayed my cynicism, except to say she could probably, and indeed probably did write that line before Ollie Robbins had even started talking. But the rest of it probably merits closer scrutiny. It is clear that Number 10 not only made the appointment before vetting was completed, but that Mandelson was already acting as the ambassador before the vetting, even seeing highly classified documents. With this and the constant pressure Number 10 applied to the appointment and their dismissive attitude to vetting Mandelson, it is now absolutely clear that full due process was not followed. Keir Starmer has misled the House. And I don't know whether deliberately or accidentally, this omits the crucial question of whether or not it was conscious or not conscious, any alleged misleading of the House. I think that is intrinsic to the ministerial code. So that doesn't, to me, read like a smoking gun. But James, the political editor of the New World magazine, which I cannot recommend highly enough, James Ball has written a rather good piece, again in the immediate aftermath of this evidence being given, explaining that the Prime Minister is now in more trouble than he was before, which oddly I can agree with, while simultaneously saying that Friday's story was a bit of a storm in a teacup, because the sacking of Ollie Robbins is now looking both rash and unfair. And I'm afraid those of us who have got very, very little faith in Keir Starmer left are not going to be comforted by the fact that the vetting story appears not to be as important as it was originally presented, because the reaction to the vetting story now becomes the story. And it is not a good look to pass the buck, to deny all responsibility, and then to punish a man who appears to have done his job, if anything, rather well. In the case of Ollie Robbins. 11:35 is the time. Anyway, back to phones in schools. I just thought I'd share that with you, because I did think that there was a bit absent, if you like, from our conversation, and that is thoughtful and substantive accounts as to why this is a huge story. I think they are still missing, Kemi Badenoch's best efforts notwithstanding, but why Keir Starmer could end up in more trouble after Ollie Robbins' evidence than he was before is brilliantly explained in the New World. You can log on at the website, you can read a couple of articles, 3 a month for free without signing up for a subscription, by the inimitable James Ball. Adam is in Berkhamsted to take us back to the phones question. What do you reckon, Adam?
Hi, James. First time caller as well, so apologies for the nerves. But
welcome. It's only me.
I'm an 18-year-old at sixth form in Berkhamsted, and when I was in the lower school, there was no such ban on phones, but we weren't allowed to have them seen, which meant we had them in our pockets, which, as you said, inevitably led to rather a few people, myself included, using your phones in lessons.
Exactly, and I mean the distraction and all the other elements of it that would create. So You're still in sixth form now, so have you got your phone with you now, Adam?
Yes, I have indeed. So
yeah, I know you have, mate. I'm talking to it.
When we moved into sixth form, the rules were relaxed slightly, where we were allowed to use them at break time and lunchtime.
Okay.
But for the lower school, I was the first year that this wasn't applicable to, but the lower school, they introduced phone pouches. So the children, the lower school, they lock their phone away and then unlock it at the end of the day.
Where does the pouch go? In your locker or something like that? Or
the pouch goes in your bag, and there's regular spot checks to ensure that people haven't left it unlocked or not locked it away.
And how is it unlocked?
There's magnets. So there's about 10 or so magnets at the front gate, and you clip it on and then it unlocks the pouch.
Oh, wow. Okay. I might buy shares in that. Don't name any companies. I'm going to look it up when I finish talking to you and buy some shares.
But I think that the ban, from what I've seen, my sister's in the young years, and she says that it's been fantastic because of disruption in class have reduced.
There's no two ways about it. The phones, I think that not letting you take them to school at all is unfair.
I agree with that.
And probably ridiculous, if not slightly dangerous. Allowing you to police your own phone use by keeping it in your pocket, but pinky promising that you're never going to take it out again is daft, I think, as we would all attest. And therefore, the two choices between the school locking it away, which is quite a fuss and palaver, or deploying technology that allows the child to lock it away, but with a guarantee that it stays locked away, is going to emerge as the optimal course, albeit that it's going to involve some costs originally for schools that some schools may not be able to afford. Do you feel, as an 18-year-old at school with a phone, that the general good would be better served if you weren't able to access your phone until the end of the school day?
Absolutely. There's been issues in my area of social media. There's been people trying to start school against school sorts of fights, and that's circulating on social media in schools. So I think that whilst there is some good about phones in schools, for example, safety, I think the negatives greatly outweigh the positives.
Very nicely put, although, of course, you wouldn't have been able to ring this radio programme in this context if it wasn't for the fact that you are allowed your phone during the school day.
Luckily, I'm on study leave, so...
Well, there you go, everyone's a winner. I was going to say swings and roundabouts, and thank you for just averting me from asking someone on the phone whether or not they currently had a phone with them. You know what I'm thinking of. Now, Adam, take care, mate, and good luck with your... Is it A-levels this summer for you? Are you up at 6?
Indeed, yeah.
All right, well, get off the phone and get back to work, honestly, and don't blame it on me if your parents ask why you're not studying at the moment. For heaven's sake, honestly, 11:39 is the time. Best of luck with that. Indeed, best of luck to everybody doing their A-levels this summer. I did once do that. I've told you this story probably 763 times, is it, Keith, or 764? It was a story in the news about 20 years ago about people who didn't have a phone, people who were living with neither a landline nor a mobile. And I cut it out of the newspaper like I always do. I didn't mention it to the producer. I kept it in reserve for things that we might talk about a little bit later in the programme. And I got it out and I'm looking at it and I'm reading it. I said, I'll tell you what would it be like to live without a phone? I said, here, listen, if you don't have a phone, give me a ring now on 035. That's not going to work. And I nearly did it again, asking a bloke on the phone if he had a phone. Laura is in Sevenoaks. Laura, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
Agree with Adam. I think it's absolutely the right thing that children shouldn't have phones in school. And I take my son's experience as proof of this, because he's in year 8 and at school in Kent, and they have to lock their phones away. They have to hand their phones in at the beginning of the school day, and they get them back at the end of the day. Except for one day a week when they have games all afternoon, and for whatever reason the school haven't worked out a mechanism to get their phones back to them. I guess because they're in different bits of the school and everyone, they're not all together as a class, so it's not easy to get their phones back to them that day.
Right.
So on that day they get their phones back at the beginning of lunch.
Oh yeah.
And my son has told me it's his worst day of the week because everyone stares at their phones for the whole of lunch. No one talks to each other. All the clubs are boring because no one goes to them because everyone just wants to be on their phones.
I mean, I'm not shocked by this or even surprised, but I'm moved by what you say. There's a poignancy to that image, isn't there? It's like a sort of Charlie Brooker film of all the kids just staring at their phones instead of talking to each other. I mean, you know how my brain works, Laura. I immediately start thinking, well, it's not as bad as you say, because if they were allowed their phones every day, it probably wouldn't be like that every day. It's just because they're only allowed them one day a week that the novelty never wears off, effectively. But still...
There's an element of that, I'm sure. There is the novelty, but then they have their phones to and from school, and so it's not like it's the only time in their lives they have a phone.
That's a good point. So parents would be, I think, understandably concerned if they were not allowed to have the phone on the journey to and from school. So the outright ban of phones from school premises is a no-no. Although I am, of course, what time is it? 11:42. I've got time to hear from parents or pupils or former pupils. I forgot that we could include actual pupils in this until Adam rang in, an actual pupil. I wonder how that works, the outright ban. Similarly, I don't think anybody is currently minded to defend the idea that you can leave it in your pocket as long as you pinky promise never to take it out again.
I think the outright ban, if you think about kind of the future of where we...
Yes.
I think a lot of us want to go in terms of whether children should have smartphones at all. They're not saying that no phones are allowed, they're saying no smartphones. So if all of those, if the parents and the children that are worried about safety had, brick phones, and on the whole thing about being able to track them, know where they are, well, there's things that you can put in their bags or on their blazers that track them so that you can still do that if you want to. We have it in his sports bag because his sports kit costs a fortune, and he often leaves it on the train.
Where's your sports kit in Hartlepool? You live in Kent.
Exactly. So there are ways of doing it without them having smartphones. So I'm not buying the whole we need to be able to. They need to have them so that they're safe. I don't buy that.
Fair enough. Okay, so I mean, you could live with the outright ban, but the favoured one is the handing in and getting it back. Just stop doing it on sports days as well. Make sure they have it on sports days as well. Do they do sport off the school premises?
Yes.
And do some kids go home from sport rather than going back to school and then going home afterwards?
Sometimes it's depending on if they're in certain teams and things.
I've solved it for you.
Go off,
I've solved it for you. That's why they're doing it, so that the kids don't have to come back to school to get their phone before going home again. But there should be a way around it. Thank you, Laura. Great stuff. Another sparkling debut. I don't know what people are nervous about. It is coming up to 11:45. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. These pouches seem to be the way forward, don't they? Because with all the magnets on the school gates as well. But that is going to involve an expense that many schools, particularly in the state sector, simply won't be able to meet. So if the government's bringing in the policy, the government should provide... Well, I say the government should provide the funds. I sound like the sort of political headbanger that I normally routinely attack. But yeah, the money still has to come from somewhere, doesn't it? And if the government, in quotes, is providing it, then it is coming from me and thee. And that's fine, but let's not pretend it's some magic money tree that it's being plucked from. It's coming up to 11:45. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 11:48. You are listening to James O'Brien. I've got a few texts in no particular order. This from Bev. An outright ban has happened in Belgian schools and it is opposed by the pupils and some of the teachers also. They're allowed to take them to school but must switch them off when at school. Haven't had any examples yet of the outright ban, as in it's not allowed on the premises. The various different ways of ensuring that although they can take a phone to and from school, they can't go near it while they're at school is where we are. Why are we talking about this? Because the government has announced a surprise policy change and schools will now be forced to ban smartphones. And don't forget the relevance of the word smart in that portmanteau. Morning, James. Our son is year 9. The school has pouches where the children lock their phones up at the beginning of the day and can unlock them on their way out of the school. I didn't understand that text when I read it, but Adam has filled us in on what it involves. It generally works pretty well. It's not 100% foolproof, but an outright ban, how would that be enforced? I can't see the police arresting staff or students, so in answer to your binary question, it's a no. A quick shout out to Mark. I got your joke, Mark, but it's not really one for the radio. I said this is a binary question and I want binary answers, and Mark replied 111-001-10001-111-000-111-111-111-101, which I thought was a very good joke, but as I said, it wouldn't work on the radio. Dave's in Portsmouth. Dave, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James. I'm wearing my supply teacher's hat, and there's no one easy solution to this. I've seen it in many schools, and it seems that so many of the solutions that are being put forward the burden is falling upon the school to be providing pouches or providing whatever. And also the burden is falling upon the individual teacher, because you simply can't trust kids to do the right thing. You know, if they're told you can't have them out in the classroom, sure, they'll all try and sneak it. And you're causing a situation where the teacher has to go head-to-head with a pupil to put the phone away. I didn't have it. Yes, you did. But, confiscate it. They're not there to do that. We're there to teach the children, not to be policemen, not to be taking the parents, and simply got the situation where you can't trust the kids. So maybe the parents need to take a certain responsibility as to how they've allowed their child to become so addicted to something they've got there.
I mean, maybe. I mean, the parents are taking responsibility for their children when they're at home. But, I mean, we've had a couple of 100 years of teachers taking responsibility for children when they're at school.
Oh, yeah, we do. But this is yet another thing that they're expected to do, aren't they? Now, something like the pouches, or maybe a deposit box where children...
Yes,
drop
this
the
is
box
my
off.
favourite.
Yeah, I guess it would be mine too as well, because there are all those issues around they need the phone on the way out of school and in the way to school, whatever. But if you have something like a deposit box scheme, you might need a member of staff or whatever to monitor that, and I think that should be paid for by the people who use the phone. No, seriously.
I'm just chucking. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and I don't disagree with you, but
I think if you accept that teachers have already got plenty to do without another burden being placed upon them or any of the staff at the school, you can say, look, if you want to be bringing your phone in...
I mean, they've got teachers on duty during lunch hour, you've got teachers on duty during break, you've got teachers on duty... I mean, they're always overseeing something. I mean, to be fair, Dave, if you don't enjoy overseeing things, I'm not sure you should have become a teacher in the first place.
No, well, people don't go into teaching to become phone monitors.
No, but you do. Maybe not phone monitors, but you're monitors of everything else. Well, you have to stop fights. You didn't go into teaching to stop fights, did you? But that's part of your job. You didn't go into teaching to sit in the cold watching people play football, but that's part of your job as well. I mean,
so we're agreeing. We could have this deposit thing.
Yes.
Well, you put it another way. What about the parents of the children who are well behaved? How much of that time in their lessons do they want their child to be sat idly by?
I'm not defending it.
I'm remonstrating with a pupil.
No, I want the phones locked up. I was just chuckling at the idea of getting Vodafone to pay for it. That was all.
No. Let the parents.
Oh, okay.
Or the child. And you say, well, you want the privilege or the benefit of having your phone on the way to and from school. It needs to be paid for. We could leave an empty car.
But Dave, what about the parents of the well-behaved children? Why should they have to pay for security measures brought in solely to deal with the children whose parents haven't done a bang-up job of making them well-behaved and obedient?
Well, you can't separate out it like that, can you?
You just did.
No, because I wasn't saying it should be exclusively the badly behaved ones. No, just completely.
But they're the only ones that create the need for the rule. How disruptive is it? Just in the classroom, what's the worst thing that's happened in your time that is entirely phone related?
Yeah, it varies from place to place, and I would say it's probably easing a bit over time, but you've still got that niggling little thing. And what you also don't know is not just the use in the phone in the classroom, but what's happening at break time and lunchtime through the social media, and what is being carried back into the classroom by someone who's been upset by the bullying online that they've seen about them in the break time or in the lunchtime or whatever. The phones are totally toxic. We know it in society and certainly in school. So there should be no phones in school throughout the day. Now, I know that presents a few problems because, as you said, their curriculum's stored on it. And
no, I think that ship has sailed. I mean, that was the case when I was a parent, but you can easily give them something else. Give them a piece of paper. I was just saying that's why they needed a phone when I was a parent of a school-aged children, because the schools had adopted policies that were phone reliant, or at least tablet reliant, actually, looking back a little bit more clearly. But yeah, I don't think there's any argument for saying that they need one in school. And if they need one in school this term, then just make sure that they don't next term. It's not going to be a particularly unclimbable mountain, is it? Thank you, Dave. You make some valuable points. And it's teachers, of course, that are the crucial piece of this jigsaw. And you're right. I don't know why I sniggered when you said the thing about getting... I thought you said get the phone companies to pay for it, which just made me laugh because I thought, yeah, good luck with that. It's like trying to get Elon Musk to take down hideous footage from X. But the teachers need to be front and foremost in this process because they are the people that will be charged with enforcing whatever it is that is introduced, whatever form the ban takes. It's going to be another thing on the teachers' list of responsibilities and duties. And you're absolutely right to point out how unfair that is. And it was deeply irresponsible of me to snigger in the way that I did. Brent's in Derby. Brent, what would you like to say?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm a parent of a 10-year-old who yesterday got their phone for the first time. And it's a phone. Yeah, phone.
Not a smartphone, a phone.
Not a smartphone, a phone.
How did he take it? Honestly.
She sent me a text message saying, this is my phone number. And it's because they're walking to school. They're year 5, and all their friends have a phone, but not a smartphone. It's not Wi-Fi enabled.
Is that a school policy, or is that just wise parents acting?
Well, it's wise parents also. I mean, I've told her numerous times, I know as a teacher. Now, I'm a person who's like you, a Generation X, so I'm both digital and analog, but I've also been teaching long enough to see pre-smartphone, the takeoff of smartphones and the crisis that we have. The mental health crisis, the amount of dopamine. I'm watching the zombie children at the moment.
I know.
And we need to get these devices, because if you think about what's in their pocket, computer, Wi-Fi, access to all information, ghetto blaster, recording device, it's not. People need to realise what a smartphone is. You know, it's like us.
I haven't heard the phrase ghetto blaster since about 1989, mate. Thank you for that, Brent.
True.
Oh, that's lovely. Breakdance 2, electric boogaloo. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, but could you imagine walking down your middle of your corridor with a ghetto blaster and 90 News playing Run DMC, you know what I mean?
That's a very good point, yeah. I forgot about that as well. It's annoying enough on public transport, but it would be just as annoying in school.
Exactly. And we have situations now where our policy at the moment is very much the nothing to see here, move along, and ignore it, kind of, it's in your pocket, and if they're caught using it, we punish the children. It's not sustainable. But I'm trying as a union rep, because there are a couple of incidences where I've seen recordings, kids recording things, inappropriate recordings, but also another thing, a 24/7 access for the children to their parents. Something happens at school, we haven't investigated, the child directly messages the parent rings up really angrily, unfiltered, completely uncensored, and we haven't even dealt with the situation yet.
Wow.
So there's a little bit of that over-creepage and over-communication.
There's no argument against locking them away all day, really, that I've heard.
Correct, but the problem with locking it away is we've lost behavioural staff. And you may ask the question, why as a teacher I'm ringing in today? I'm in industrial action today because our trust is trying to take my job and the job of many of teaching assistants. We are basically funding cuts, and they're cutting staff.
So this would be another expense that would impact upon the workforce. Flipping out, you've covered a lot of ground, Brent.
Yeah.
In the space of one phone call. Although I particularly enjoyed, even more than your mention of the ghetto blaster, I love the way that you said correct to me, because I sense that was precisely the tone that you adopt in the classroom.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm there for the kids because I care about the kids. And what I'm watching is slowly, I think in 20 years' time, we'll have a situation where we look back and we go, why didn't we stop it?
It's the moral panic that was real, isn't it? And if we're similar ages, we've counted them in and we've counted them out, all the moral panic, starting with the warning that video was going to kill the radio star. But this is the one that was real.
This is not the Freddy Kruegers. This is not the violent video games. No. This is not the video nasties of the 1980s. This is changing fundamentally the psychology. This is rewiring their brains at a very early age. And I think this is a public health crisis in the making. And we're starting to see the number of NEETs, aren't we? The number of children who are anxious. All of this is filtering in. And I think parents are spotting that. What would be really useful is the government create this policy, the government help implement it. Because our hard-up-head teachers, when they try and put a policy in, you get the local newspapers full of parents who kick off. We need the government to lead and actually help us out in schools rather than leave it ambiguous. They need to be clear so that we can turn around to parents and say, I'm really sorry, take it up with the government. You know, they need to help us.
So it is a little bit. Here you go, you deal with this now. I wonder if the other option that people are telling me does happen in their schools where the signal is blocked, have sort of technology there that blocks the signal. The teachers have got access to the Wi-Fi, but the kids haven't. I don't know, is the short answer. But I told you it wasn't as black and white as I used to think it was, albeit that the binary nature of this phone-in has actually yielded much more nuance and complexity than you might have expected. It's almost like I know what I'm doing. Brent, stay safe. There's something about that, isn't there, Brent in Derby? A couple of you texted, you spotted the same thing that I spotted, which is also relevant to Generation X. You just need a colleague called Terence. And then I could have gone to, like, if Eleanor was called Terence, which obviously she's not, she's called Eleanor, I could have said, which caller is next? Terence. Brent? Derby? Terence? Brent? Derby? No? Oh.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 3 minutes after 12. I've been slightly haunted by, so apologies to Manisha and Neil and Lindsay and Joe and Del and others. I've got a funny feeling we'll be talking about phones in schools again, and indeed I'm fairly confident that colleagues on LBC will be talking about it later today. The other story in the news about schools that was quite interesting was about pupils swapping their uniforms for tracksuits. Do you know, I sometimes tell you that there were things I never knew or understood properly before I started doing this job. And that was one of them. I find it hard to believe what a wombat I used to be, but I used to really get on my high horse about discipline and things like that in schools. Even if you were to have met me many, many moons ago, you'd have heard me endorsing corporal punishment on the grounds that I received it on a regular basis and it didn't do me any harm. Of course, I was well into my 40s before I began to truly understand and unpick some of the harm that it did me, being beaten regularly as a schoolboy by teachers. But I used to be, uniforms are really important, you've got to get in the right mood. And someone just said to me, some kids can't afford them. Some kids' parents can't afford them. The more you have, I was reminded of this when our caller in Kent a moment ago talked about having a tracker in her son's sports bag because the sports kit, the PE kit, is so expensive. The reasoning behind getting rid of blazers, trousers and skirts and replacing them with tracksuits is to be more inclusive. Some schools already do it. But we've actually got a woke watch, I've just realised, without me actually having spotted it at the time. So I've got nephews whose primary school involved wearing tracksuits. A sort of sweatshirt and sweatpants, or maybe slightly smarter trousers, but definitely a sweatshirt, whereas my children were always blazer and tie. At their state primary school, very much blazer and tie, and their cousins were tracksuits. And the reason, I think, was because the school that my nephews went to was trying to be more inclusive. So the reasoning behind all of the schools that already do it, and the suggestion from MPs on the Culture, Media and Sports Committee that more schools should do it, is to make uniform more inclusive. But somebody from something called the Campaign for Real Education has decided to describe it as woke dogma, which is the first woke watch in quite a long time. It's, 2 years since everything was woke? You couldn't announce anything without some idiot popping up and saying that it's woke? How can a tracksuit be woke? But anyway, there's your campaign. A Campaign for Real Ale? Wonderful institution, big fan. Campaign for Real Education? No, me neither. It is 6 minutes after 12. So the thing I've been haunted by is that story I told you last week about what happened to me in Marks and Spencer's. And I don't normally go to Marks and Spencer's. I buy a big issue sometimes off my friend Lawrence, who stands outside selling them, but I've moved to Brentford now. I'm not in Chiswick anymore, for those of you who care about such things. And Brentford is very much Morrisons and Lidl at the moment. I tell you what, there's a champagne in Lidl now, $13.99, perfectly quaffable, as wine experts would say. That's the perfect, really, for a champagne socialist, isn't it? A £13.99 bottle of champagne from Lidl. That is almost as if the wine buyers had champagne socialists in mind when they came up with this rather... And I bought a few yesterday because, as I mentioned earlier, my youngest is turning 18 this week. So I don't even go into Marks and Spencer's very often anymore. But I was in there the other day, and I told you I witnessed something I haven't seen since I was a kid. Or it felt like I hadn't seen it since I was a kid, which was two members of staff in Marks and Spencer's getting extremely physical with a shoplifter, to the point that I found the whole experience quite jarring. Jarring for two reasons. Jarring number one, it took me by surprise, so that was like mildly jarring. And jarring number two, because I was right up against it when it kicked off in the doorway. I was just on my way out, actually, so I couldn't have been closer to the action. Jarring number two Because it's really physical. I know I hit this drum quite a lot last week, but I don't think I can express it strongly enough. Because it means that people like me who conduct phone-ins about shoplifting have almost all behaved quite badly and irresponsibly, as if it is somehow easy to stop the problem. Lidl, of course, you've got a barcode on your receipt and you can't get out of the till area unless you present it, which, of course, won't stop the sort of hardcore, often drug-addicted shoplifter who will just leap over the barriers. But the more casual shoplifter is going to be deterred, even if it's only into going somewhere else. But they are going to be deterred by the old barcode on the barrier to get out of the shop. But I really was shaken by the experience in Marks and Sparks, because I hadn't witnessed that practice of properly collaring shoplifters. Two men collaring, that's the perfect word to use, collaring a shoplifter who resisted whatever it is they do. It's not arrest, is it? But he resisted quite furiously, and they had him. They're big lads, and they knew what they were doing, and they had him, and they transported him to the back of the shop, and there was like this weird. What's the word that I want? Like a ripple that went through those of us who were nearby, because we hadn't seen anything like it. I told you a couple of years ago, the same branch of the same shop, there was a perfectly respectable woman, I got no beef with what she was doing, remonstrating with a shop assistant in the same doorway before the refurbishment, if you care about such things, about the fact that she had just seen somebody walk out. They hadn't even bothered stealing, like putting it in a bag. Someone just walked out with a basket, a metal basket full of food, and they just walked off up the street with it. My part of town at the time had quite a big problem with shoplifters. It even made the national news at one point. I don't know why it happened to our patch for that period, but it did. And I remember thinking that, yes, I'm on that woman's side. Why aren't you doing more? And then I saw two shop assistants doing more, and I suddenly realised why you usually don't. And that is why I'm still really, I will even say guilty. I hate it when I realise I've got something wrong. Every phone-in I've ever done about shoplifting has been built upon a false premise that it's easy to fix. If you're right-wing, I suppose you blame it all on the police. No, you don't. If you're right-wing, you blame it on anybody except the people actually responsible for it, which is, of course, the shoplifters. But if you're trying to find the blame for the people not stopping it, you're going to look at your shop assistants, who sometimes will be on little more than minimum wage, or you're going to start wailing about the police, to whose workforce you were entirely in favour of the cuts that began when Theresa May was Home Secretary. So I have been thinking for some time, and I've said it to you in the past, but I can feel it firming up now, this, and I'm really interested in your views on this, because the Deputy Commissioner, the Assistant Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Matt Twist, was talking about fuel thefts this morning. The rocketing price of petrol as a consequence of the madness being undertaken by Trump and Netanyahu in Iran has led to an increase in theft, fuel theft, people filling up and driving away, or doing this other... I won't give you the details, actually, because it might almost encourage crime. But filling up their cars and not paying for the petrol. That's going up exponentially at the moment because of partly, they think, because of the cost of fuel. And Matt Twist, the Assistant Commissioner, had this to say on that subject earlier this morning.
And there's more that retailers of petrol can do to prevent theft, because actually they have control over whether they authorise people to fill up their car. They have control over whether they insist on prepayment or not. So, would you urge retailers to go to a prepayment system? I think if people are concerned about it, they need to think about what preventative measures they can take. I mean, it's not for me to direct retailers, but if individual places or locations are seeing higher theft of petrol, there are measures that they can take, and we see some of them do that.
This is the thing that I've been... And I used to be in retail. You know that was... not like when I claimed that I was a building site worker. I did a fortnight in Doncaster in 1988. But I worked in retail quite a lot. It was my job at university, and it was my full-time job for quite a while after leaving university, as I tried and failed to persuade various newspapers to give me a break. I like retail. It was also my job in my year 6 months at River Island in Worcester before I went into a university. I get retail. I know retail, or at least I thought I knew retail because of the experiences that I had 30 plus years ago. And possibly because of that experience, I've been a little bit reluctant to go all in on what I'm about to say. But hearing the Assistant Commissioner say it earlier this morning, it sort of hardened my resolve, if you like, because this is a capitalist society. These organisations, and I'm talking now about the big chains and the petrol stations, actually, because that's what Matt Twist brought into the equation today. I will urge you, not just encourage you, to get involved in this conversation if you're involved in the smaller end of the retail market. If you are, for example, if you've got one shop and you have to deal with this problem yourself, because what I'm about to say may not apply to you. But the profits being made by a Marks and Spencer's or a Morrisons or a Waitrose, or indeed a Shell or an Esso or are so big that the idea that there's a mystery here is, to me, increasingly ridiculous. That these companies, and this is what I want you to talk to me about, correct me if I'm wrong, these companies are just factoring it in to their profits and losses. You are looking at a decision to accommodate theft because the cost of stopping it has been calculated to be too high, either in entirely financial terms or in other terms as well, because you don't want fights and scuffles and scraps in your shop. I don't know why. But there is no mystery here. For big business, big retail consortia or petrol stations, they have decided not to tackle theft. Am I right? 0345 6060973. And that's fine. But the rest of us should probably stop wringing our hands, clutching our pearls and furrowing our brows in pursuit of the, quotes, reasons, end quotes, for why this is going on. And two stories, one of which I mentioned to you last week, another one is in the news today, which is why I'm returning my attention to this story, involve employees of Waitrose and Morrisons, in these cases, losing their jobs after tackling shoplifters. It's always a little bit more than that, but there's a chap in the Times today who has worked at Morrisons since he was 17 years old. He was a store manager, 29 years of service, who has told journalists that he tackled a shoplifter. I'll give you his words. I stepped forward and I flung my arm back. That was my instant reaction. I grabbed his arm to stop him entering his bag to grab something, and then an altercation happened. My thought is, I've got to stop this guy. I don't know what he's going to do, not only to me but anybody else. He then called police, but was later investigated by Morrisons, who have a deter and not detain policy. And this disciplinary meeting found that he should be dismissed for not following the deter and not detain policy. This follows the case of the Waitrose worker last month who grappled with an Easter egg thief and got fired for his trouble. I think, again, there's always a little bit more to it than the headline allows. He threw a bit of chocolate bunny across the shop floor, and I presume the possibility that it could hit a customer meant that he got handed his sandwiches wrapped in a road map after 17 years of service. The chap that runs Iceland, who's one of those people who seems to join political parties with unerring regularity, he has offered the Morrisons guy a job with his company. Here are some numbers for you. The number of shoplifting offences in Britain is up now to 519,381 in the 12 months to September. 519,381. The incidents of violence number at about 1,600 a day, according to the British Retail Consortium. So, whatever the policy is, I don't know if it's working. I've got I've actually got a bunch of questions for you, and I really want you to join in on this one. It's the kind of subject you can join in on, even if you haven't really felt the urge or the need, or you haven't fancied getting involved in some of the other conversations that we have. The first is, and you can be as discreet and or as diplomatic as you please. Have you worked somewhere where you are actively discouraged from tackling thieves? 0345 6060 973. Question number 2, is this something that the retailers should be forced to tackle? Because it's a scary experience for staff and fellow customers alike. But equally, it's an incredibly enraging experience. This is why I had sympathy. I still have sympathy for her because she knew no better. But the woman in the front of Marks and Spencer's berating a shop assistant for not stopping a shoplifter. It's that sense of being a mug that you have when you're paying for something that somebody else is stealing. It was a misplaced anger, that, because the shop assistant should not be stopping the thief, I don't think, because it is such a potentially physical encounter. And we now discover that in some shops, this is why I remain both fascinated and slightly confused by the experience I had in Marks and Spencer last week. In some shops, it appears, if you then step up to the plate and start doing what everybody says they want, including radio presenters who frankly should have done a little bit more research or at least come to a slightly better understanding of the issue before they started waxing lyrical about it. I'm looking at you, James O'Brien. Even when you step up to the plate and do what we all think we want these shop workers to do, they end up getting into bother and even fired for their trouble. Morrisons, which is a shop I go to every day, so I don't want to get barred. I should read you what their statement said. We are continuing to take wide-ranging action to address the threat of shoplifting or violence in our stores. The health and safety of all colleagues and customers is of paramount importance to Morrisons. I know one of the security guards in my local branch, and he's brilliant. He works incredibly hard. It's kind of hours that are staggering, and he's very, very good at what he does. I haven't had a conversation with him yet about deter and not detain, but the statement goes on. These include detailed procedures for handling shoplifting incidents which are in place to protect both the colleague involved and surrounding colleagues and customers. That's the bit, you see, and which seek to de-escalate and calmly control the situation. We will not ask colleagues to put themselves at risk. So if you're not asking colleagues to put themselves at risk, you are never going to stop it. Discuss. That's just my theory, right? 0345 6060 973. You might massively reduce it by saying, we know what you've got, take it out of the bag and give it back. I've witnessed this. It's often school children have nicked some sweets or something like that. Take it out of the bag and give it back. And they take it out of the bag. I know your mum. But if you've got, so all you get is that one who is going to, probably someone who's got other problems, whether they're linked to addiction or otherwise. The one like the one I saw last week is going to resist violently and furiously. In which case, at the moment, you've got two choices. You either put yourself at risk or you let them go. And I think that if we really want to address this problem, then the retailers need to be training and paying people who are not just prepared, but poised to put themselves at risk. And it's their decision not to that explains the burgeoning epidemic. Come at this from any angle you want, but I've thought this for some time. I really have. If every stockroom in the country was full of shoplifters and the police weren't turning up to take them away, the story would have a slightly different dimension. But in the first instance, that line there in the Morrison statement, it's the beginning and the end of the story, isn't it? We have clear guidance from the risk of harm, which must be strictly followed, and here it is. Detailed procedures for handling incidents in place to protect the colleague and surrounding colleagues and customers. So if you can't get them to give it back, you let them go. Am I right? And if I am right, the reason why we've got so much shoplifting in this country at the moment, so many shoplifters getting away with theft in this country at the moment, is a conscious decision on the part of the retailers. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. It's 12:22.
James O'Brien on LBC.
24 minutes after 12 is the time, and this is just really interesting because I thought it was a lazy phone-in, and I have conducted it in a lazy fashion, but it's anything but. Shoplifting epidemic, and a lot of you pointing out the role that poverty will be playing in prompting some people to steal. That's not an excuse, of course, that's an explanation. But at the other end of the telescope, the companies that essentially allow it to happen on their premises because they don't like the alternatives. It's the least bad option to wave it through. Phil's in Rugby. Phil, what do you reckon?
Good afternoon, James.
Hello.
First time caller, so bear with me.
Welcome.
I was a senior manager of a motorway services, and obviously, as you know, that some of the units would be open 24 hours.
Yes.
One in particular was quite high on the list of thefts.
Right.
And when I raised the question of, what else can we do? What could we do more? Can we get security? Obviously, the company I work for had obviously factored that into the cost, and it's not under mitigating circumstances. It wasn't viably possible to employ a security guard through those.
It was. They just chose not to.
They chose not to. Yes,
because it would have cost more than they were losing. So they just so there comes a point where if they're nicking enough, they'll probably hire a security guard.
Yes, that comes back.
How did that make you feel? How did that make you feel? Were you surprised by that? To have it laid out so starkly?
Yeah, well, you've got a couple of members of staff who work throughout the night, and are they fully prepared? Or are they fully protected? And that's a no, because motorways are a hotbed of criminal activity because they can get away quickly
and
disappear. And you just felt as though the staff weren't protected enough.
But would they be protected less if they were encouraged to have a go, as it were?
Possibly not. And also security guards, some security guards would necessarily tackle it. It'd be more of a visual deterrent. But
yeah, that works too. But it is. I mean, how old are you? Do you mind me asking?
I'm 52.
Oh, it's almost exactly the same age. I'm pretty sure that shoplifters getting collared was much more commonplace when we were kids than it is now.
Yes, absolutely.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And so decisions have been made somewhere down the line to take the foot off the gas on this one. And all of the commentary, and I'm guilty of this myself, although I'm making amends for it now, hinges upon the idea that it's all from the other end. It's all the criminals or the police not being very good at their job. But it's not. It's a company. It's a commercial decision, a lot of this.
It's cost versus losses.
Yeah.
Basically.
And then the other form of losses, like, I suppose some things that have changed for the better in the workplace would include, care for people who've been traumatised, people who might be off work with stress or something like that because they got involved in something. The companies aren't going to want that either, are they?
No, not at all.
Oh, good man. Indulge my inner nerd, would you, just for a moment? How far from your home was the service station that you worked in?
About 15 minutes away.
Oh, is that all? So is it quite? It's quite liminal. It's like an airport, is it? Working there, it's like a sort of alternative universe. You step through the doors of a motorway service station. It's not like stepping through the doors of normal shops.
No, it's a completely different world. It's quite high volume, quite intense.
Did you enjoy it?
I did, but
you don't do it anymore.
The stress wouldn't take it anymore. I'm in a much less stressful job now, and I'm loving life. So
that's it. Then you're winning.
Working 90+ hours a week, plus being on the phone 24/7 to police if there's any activity they need to access CCTV. You've got issues. You're answering mobile phones. You're answering emails, and you're doing reports. That life is not for me anymore.
Has anyone done the reality TV show yet? Set in a motor? They have they, Keith?
Yeah, okay. I believe Gloucester. I think one on the M5 was done.
All right, fair enough. Suddenly, when you were talking there, you find yourself thinking, "Crikey, that's like a daily soap opera unfolding up." But of course, someone else has already thought of that. They've thought of everything except monkey tennis. Thank you, Phil. Rob's in Stockport. Rob, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi James. You okay?
Yeah, I'm great. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Well, I used to work for a security company that covered a rather large station in Manchester.
I got caught fare dodging there once. I wasn't actually fare dodging. I got on at Bredbury. I got on the train at Bredbury Green.
You're fine at Bredbury.
No, but I got off the train at Piccadilly, and I just hadn't got a ticket. I'd just forgotten, or I was in a bit of a daze that day. Oh, they read me the riot act.
I didn't say Piccadilly Station, by the way.
No, I know you didn't. You didn't. I know, but there are many big stations in Manchester. So anyway, you weren't on duty in 1990, were you?
No, it wasn't you. Only 15.
It was. So was I. That was 1988, and I was 16. Go on. What else? What did you want to say?
Yeah. So I worked there as security, but it was a hands-off approach.
Yeah, there it is.
You do not touch people, and obviously there's retail at Piccadilly. You've got Boots and concessions,
or Oxford Road, or any other station.
They would come out and say that guy's just been stealing, and it's like, well, I can't do anything. What we had to do was ring British Transport Police,
right,
and wait for them to come.
Well, by which point, Chomo's disappeared over the horizon.
Yeah, gone, done.
What was it like when we were kids then? Actually, all three of us, you, me and Phil, all of a similar vintage. What was it like when we were kids then?
Well, I feared authority because I knew that if I got into trouble, my mum would get hold of me.
Same. Yeah, but you'd still have to be caught by someone to get into trouble with your mum in the first place, whereas now...
And it's that thing. It's like, I was wearing a security jacket. Yeah. I had all the accoutrements, the video camera, and
so you're just a human deterrent.
Yeah, for that low level.
You're a CCTV with legs.
Yeah, but people who are intent on doing things know that I can't.
Well, actually, we probably shouldn't be telling them.
Yeah, well, we're doing the wrong thing here, aren't we?
Oh dear, Rob, take care, mate. Thank you. And this is what I thought was going to happen. And it's only because of what I do for a living that I find this so enraging. Because I like to conduct good faith conversations, and we've had honest chats about what needs to be done, which have completely overlooked the fact that there has been a conscious decision to do less. And then it gets worse in the case of, and we should name these lads, because they've been, as far as I can tell, they've been appallingly treated. You've got Sean Egan over at Morrisons, and then you've got the lad that we talked about last week from Waitrose, Walker Smith, 17 years on the job he had. The other lad had 19 years. The other man, I don't know why I'm calling them lads, the other man had 29 years. They tackle the shoplifters, which is what people like me thumping the desk, why can't they catch them? We want them to do this. And then they do it and they get fired. Matt Hewitt's got your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:35 is the time. Amazingly, nobody has got the missing word round right today. By which I mean everybody, because I got it wrong. I read out the missing word at the beginning. Salmon, hooked on blank, swim twice as far. It's not, as many of you suggested, hooked on the back of a speedboat. It's a missing word round. I tell you when it's missing more than one word. Salmon hooked on blank, swim twice as far. It's becoming a recurring theme in the missing word round, this, which is quite a big clue. Congratulations to everyone who got it right, especially the people who didn't hear me accidentally give away half of the answer. Salmon hooked on cocaine, swim twice as far. What was the cocaine story last week? Hippos, cocaine hippos. So now we've got a film called Cocaine Bear, which is, it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's basically a film about a bear that finds a load of cocaine and goes bonkers. That's fiction. Is it based on a true story, that film? It probably is, So we've got a cocaine bear. Last week we had the cocaine hippos, who don't actually take cocaine, but they were called the cocaine hippos because they were bought by a drug lord. It was Pablo Escobar, wasn't it? No. And they kind of got released into the wild when he was captured or killed, I forget which. And there's now about 200 of them running wild in Colombia. So we've got a cocaine bear, based on a true story. An American black bear, Wikipedia tells me, ingested several kilograms of a bag containing about 34 kilos of lost cocaine and went berserk. And now we've got salmon. And this is because of all the drug residue that makes its way into our water. Wildlife experts reckon that fish exposed to drugs through water pollution may end up swimming into unfamiliar waters or wear themselves out with the extra effort. The other thing these salmon do, they talk endlessly about themselves, apparently. So that is the missing word round. Salmon hooked on cocaine swim twice as far. 12:37 is the time. That's the missing word round. I forgot to do everything yesterday. I wanted to do something. Oh, yes, I've got a nice missed information for you as well. I'll share that with you shortly. But before that, back to this. You ever get this sense that we're doing something quite interesting? We're not quite sure what happens next. I can't have any more radio phone-ins about shoplifting that focus on either, the police aren't doing their jobs properly. Remember Kemi Badenoch suggesting that the police should go out and catch thieves instead of catching speeding cars, which are, of course, caught by cameras on posts. So I don't know whether or not she thinks that you're going to be able to have posts with cameras on them marching up and down the high street collaring thieves. But the lazy right-wing position that just blame this or blame that. We're the party of law and order until you need an excuse for something, you just attack the police. It's not. It's a pointless phone-in until you start having a phone-in about the people who are being stolen from, as in the shareholders and the directors, not as in the people on the shop floor, because the people on the shop floor are going to get fired if they do the right thing. So we can't have any more phone-ins about shoplifting without focusing on the people doing the decisions, the people making the decisions. And that, it seems to me, is the biggest element of this story and one that's almost entirely absent. 12:38 is the time. Peter's on the Wirral. Peter, what would you like to say?
Oh, thanks, James. Yeah, could I just say, just to put a little background in, I was in the security industry for over 30 years.
Okay.
Across industrial, retail, door supervision, nightclubs, things like that. So I had a long, broad experience operationally of the retail was always our nightmare. I could explain to a building site manager that he needs a big fence and a good gate and control people coming and going, and that will protect his stuff.
How much do you get paid for that?
It was almost always minimum wage for the gate.
Right. I shouldn't giggle then. I was going to say, you need a big gate and a fence. It's not exactly Einstein territory, is it, for someone with a building site?
It isn't, exactly. And then I would go to a retail establishment and say to the manager, why are you stacking beer near the exit door?
Yeah.
And he would look at me with a blank face and go, well, that's where they've told me to put it.
Yeah, because they're going to...
But the thing is, James,
it's the same reason, isn't it? So you're concerned because they're going to run in and nick it, and he's been told to put it there because it makes us more likely to buy it.
Exactly. But for me, in my experience, I at the end of my career, that I transferred over to training security officers. And in the security industry now, if your job as a security officer requires you at any time to lay hands on somebody, restrain them in any way, detain them, then you have to have an extra training element now. It's called conflict management and restraint techniques. And obviously, that is more of a specialised job because we're down to then the legalities of reasonable force. The people who get trained in that, again, it comes down to this monetary thing, would expect a higher rate of pay than someone who just literally deters, walks around in a uniform to deter.
Is that right?
If I'm going to lay hands and I'm going to put myself in danger, I want a reasonable return for that. And again, this is why the shops won't buy it, won't pay for it.
So what happened in Marks and Sparks last week then? I hope I'm not getting these lads into trouble, but
No, this is the problem. The staff now are feared for their jobs as they can see now.
Maybe they've hired two people specifically to deal with it in that particular branch, because that fellow was not going anywhere, mate. They had him by the proverbial short and curlies, and they effectively manhandled him, or that's not the correct word to use. They carried him practically to the back of the shop. I witnessed it myself, and it was because it happens so rarely that I was so struck by it. So that's the policy decision at board, at management level, beyond the shop, isn't it?
I would hazard a guess, and I can't preempt it.
No, of course, mate.
But I would suggest that if the person who was manhandled and put into the back brought out a legal case, we would find that a bit like the case with Mandelson at the moment. People would say, we never asked him to do that.
You get a round of applause for that.
It's true.
You're bringing Mandelson into the shoplifting conversation. I know it's your field, but a well-trained, competent guard would be able to insulate themselves from any of those concerns. I know my rights kind of territory. The guard responds to saying, well, so do I. And I'm the one that's trained, you're not, so, put your trousers on, you're nicked, so to speak.
But the other side of that, and you alluded to it earlier, about the corporate element of this, and it goes right down to corner shops, all the way up to big shops. It's the way they're designed. They're designed for the shoplifter. And I don't mean deliberately.
No, of course not.
If you go into any corner shop, you can't see anybody. There's shelves 6 foot high.
Because they need to get as much stock as possible onto the shop floor. What's changed, Peter? Well, I mean, I don't like wanging on about, because I don't like the idea of in my dayitis and things are always much better. It's like those ludicrous Facebook posts about drinking water out of hose pipes and living on spangles. But in the last 30 or 40 years, something has shifted here. The idea of going out shoplifting with relative impunity is still quite new. So what were the biggest shifts while you were on duty, while you were in the job?
It was a person who trained me once said that the problem for the thief is a thief needs a market. They need someone to sell it to.
Yeah.
So if you can stop the market, the thief can't steal. Someone is buying the product that they're stealing from the shops. If you steal a whole range of meat joints of beef,
yes, of course,
that's not for you. That's going into a pub somewhere, into a club or whatever.
Even going door to door, we've heard people like the Avon lady, but with stolen
and
chicken.
People buy it.
And that's a poverty issue as well, because there'll be some people that wouldn't do that if they were okay financially, but if they're on their uppers, they're more likely to. A few people getting in touch to make that point. Not an excuse, a potential explanation. But that would be your answer to the question of what's changed, and the question is market. Demand has increased, and therefore supply has risen to meet it, which reminds us that we are talking about a very capitalist practice. Deciding at a cost-benefit ratio that it's not worth paying the money on preventing the pilfering, because it would cost more than the pilfering currently costs. Peter, what a brilliant call. Thank you. 12:45 is the time. I've got another Donald Trump dispatch in front of me. We haven't mentioned him for a couple of days. It's one of the maddest yet. In fact, it's so mad, I would have thought that it was a pastiche or a parody or a fake if it wasn't for the fact that Simon Marks has just shared it on social media, which means it's true. But my goodness me, it's mad. I'll share some, or possibly, if you're very good, all of it with you after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
47. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I want to do one of these. We haven't done one for a while, and we should do them more.
Missed information.
Thank you, Emily. So here's a headline. Judge criticises long-term asylum hotel family rooms. How many times have I said to you that one of the biggest tragedies, really, for our society in recent years has been the deployment of the myth, the lie, as with so many dangerous, damaging, deadly lies in this country at the moment. These ones can be traced back, not exclusively, but in large part to Nigel Farage, that asylum seekers or refugees are being put up in hotels that are exactly the same as they were when you were paying to stay there on your holidays. They know they're lying. But, of course, it doesn't matter because they're in the business of whipping you up into a state of righteous indignation. And if you're not an actual racist, like their base, then you can be whipped up into a state of righteous indignation by dishonesty, because it does feel wrong. Why should they be living in relative luxury when I'm having to buy stolen meat off Dirty Bob, who's just half-inched it from Morrisons? And the point being, of course, that they are not hotels in the sense that the word conveys. They are repurposed hotels. And there's a story in the news today that just drives this point home in ways that I think over the years I have failed to do as effectively as I would like. The Home Office could face legal action from hundreds of asylum-seeking families stuck in single rooms in hotels after a judge criticised the extraordinarily stressful conditions in which they are expected to live. So this is a ruling that looks at 2 families who have lived in single rooms for more than 3 years. You have a Kurdish Iraqi woman, so fleeing a country, razed to the ground in large part by Western intervention, living with her husband and 2 young children in a single hotel room in Finchley, North London, that did not provide them with a, quote, dignified standard of living, end quote. So next time you see your Uncle Bob on Facebook wanging on about how they're all living a life of luxury, ask him to explain how it can be simultaneously luxury and not a dignified standard of living. Then you have an Albanian woman who was a victim of trafficking, and of course the racists absolutely hate sex traffickers or people traffickers and care passionately about young women who have been trafficked. We know that. She has been living, a victim of trafficking, has been living with 2 teenage sons in a single room in Croydon for the last 3 years, in circumstances described by the judge hearing the case as being unacceptable. And these are exactly the same rooms that people are living in when fans of Nigel Farage call for them to be burnt alive in their beds, because that perception that they're living in luxurious or salubrious circumstances has managed to get 3/4 of the way around the world before the truth has even got its trousers on. So just bear that in mind next time you see your friendly neighbourhood racist on Facebook claiming that they have a better standard of living than you do. Just bear in mind that they don't. They don't even have a dignified standard of living. And that is a fairly classic case of
missed information.
Thank you, Emily. I want to squeeze in this Donald Trump post, because even by his standards, I think I talked about this yesterday, didn't we? He's gone now. He's gone. He's gone over the edge of sanity, or whatever it is that you want to call it. And there's more evidence of that coming. But before that, back to the shoplifting question. Tom's in Manchester. Tom, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for taking my call. It's really appreciated.
You're very welcome.
I think missing a bit of the point here. A lot of it with the retailers is image, how it looks on them as a business.
Yes.
Now, I'm a loss prevention manager for a retailer. I'm covering the northwest of England. We have a team of 9 of us, and we are in our own clothes. We still detain people by force if needs be. And I think a lot of it is...
Who pays you? Who pays you?
The company that I work for.
Oh, okay.
It's not a private company, so it's for this retailer.
For a single retailer?
Yes.
Okay, I just right. So you're not like operating in a shopping centre or something like that. I just wondered.
No.
It's not. Just wondered. Carry on.
Yeah, for a single retailer, but obviously there's teams across the country to cover this retailer.
Is that rare? I mean, I sense you're not going to tell me which retailer it is, and I wouldn't want to encourage you to do so. But that's absolutely fine. But are you talking about a provision of care here, a provision of loss prevention concern that is quite rare compared to other retailers?
It is. I've seen it less and less now, and I think as a business, we're still up there because we believe that there should be consequences for people's actions. Now, I get that, the financial struggle for everyone. I get it, but it's also the financial struggle in the business. Like we're quite a small team for the area that we cover. Yeah. We have 34 stores, and we can easily recover £5,000-6,000 a month.
And that covers your wages, you'd think?
I mean, there's teams across the whole of the country, so it does add up.
And how handsy do you get, as it were? How physical?
So all of our background, we don't have an SIA license because we're SIA exempt because all our training's in-house.
Okay.
And most of our background is police officers, military, and
so they know exactly what they can and can't do.
Yeah, and we know the law, so all our training is around law.
Of course.
As long as you can the main thing is justifying your actions. If you can justify what you're doing and why you're doing it, then you're covered by law, and you are able to detain someone.
I know you are, because I witnessed it last week, and yet so many people are labouring under the... I mean, and of course, if we learn that Morrisons has a deter but don't detain policy, then that is the polar opposite of what you're describing. So if I am absolutely determined not to be taken alive by you, what can you do to me?
It's one of them. It's people's... thing is, if I'm in a store on my own and there's 3 or 4, people who are stealing, I've got to weigh up that situation and think... No, I know, but there's 2 of you and there's 1 of me, and it's not... So, can you put me in a headlock? We can. You can by law to detain you, yeah.
You put me in a half Nelson, no problem at all.
put you to sleep. No, I'm joking.
That's my job.
But yeah, no, you can, as long as you can justify the use of the force. Yeah. There is no limit.
And that would be in terms of a feasible risk to yourself, so self-defence and self-protection. So you couldn't, if you saw me nicking biscuits, you couldn't just walk over and punch me.
No.
But if you said, "Excuse me, sir, what have you got in the bag?" and I turned around and spat in your face and ran off, you could rugby tackle me.
Yeah.
But even if you were sitting on me, having rugby tackle me, you couldn't then punch me.
No.
It's not that hard, is it?
It's not. It's really not.
No.
The thing is, as long as you stay within the law, then you've got nothing to worry about. And I find it crazy how these people have lost their jobs because of it.
Well, we're working for companies that tell them not to do it, though. So it's not. I mean, it's crazy and not crazy at the same time. If they've got a deter but don't detain policy, and you try to detain them, you've broken company policy.
Well, then where's the deterrent for anyone going into these shops? There isn't any.
Well, there's the belief that the bloke in the uniform and the high-vis vest over there is going to sit on you if you steal biscuits, but keep it under your hat, Tom. He's not.
They're not. They're not, are they?
No.
And this is why we don't wear a uniform.
And that is why you do a good job. Will you do me one tiny favour?
Go on.
Will you stay on the line and just tell Eleanor who you work for? Just for my own curiosity. I will never tell anybody else as long as I live. All right.
Will.
Thank you, mate. Don't go away, Tom. Thank you. Because this tallies with my growing theory. Oh, I love it when I get a theory. But it is. It's there anyway. Donald Trump is mad. That's not a theory. That's just counting. Here's his latest comment. I don't know if you've seen that the boss of Apple is moving on. "I have always been a big fan of Tim Cook and likewise Steve Jobs, but if Steve was not taken from the planet Earth so young and ran the company instead of Tim, the company would have done well, but nowhere near as well as it has done under Tim. For me, it began with a phone call from Tim at the beginning of my first term. He had a fairly large problem that only I, as president, could fix. Most people would have paid millions of dollars to a consultant who I probably would not have known, but who would say that he knew me well. The fees would be paid, but the job would not have gotten done. When I got the call, I said, 'Wow, it's Tim Cook. In brackets, calling. How big is that? I was very impressed with myself to have the head of Apple calling to, forgive my French, that's my words, not Trump's, kiss my ass. Anyway, he explained his problem, a tough one it was. I felt he was right and got it taken care of, quickly and effectively. That was the beginning of a long and very nice relationship. During my 5 years as president, Tim would call me, but never too much, and I would help him where I could. Years later, after 3 or 4 big helps is in capital letters, people. The President of the United States of America. Big helps in capital letters. I started to say to people, anyone who would listen, that this guy is an amazing manager and leader. He makes these calls to me. I help him out, brackets, but not always, because he will on occasion be too aggressive in his arse closed brackets, and he gets the job done, capital letters, quickly, without a dime being given to those very expensive, brackets, millions of dollars, brackets, consultants around town who sometimes get it done and sometimes don't. Anyway, Tim Cook had an amazing capital letters career, almost incomparable, and will go on and continue to do great work for Apple and whatever else he chooses to work on. Quite simply, Tim Cook is an incredible guy, ! President, capital letters, Donald J. Trump. I think when we stop being gobsmacked at the awfulness of everything is when it's all over. That's when I went a bit Kidderminster then, didn't I? So it's when it's all over. That's when the game is up. But that is the President of the United States of America, the successor to Barack Obama, to John F. Kennedy, to Ronald Reagan, and even to Jimmy Carter. That's it for today. If you missed any of the show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, which you can, of course, download for free, as well as the LBC app, which keeps you up to date with all of the opinions and news and videos and what have you. And, of course, don't forget all the podcasts as well, including Full Disclosure and the James O'Brien Daily, which is like a sort of little digest, a bite-sized version of this programme. Tom Sawbrick will be with you at 4 on LBC. Sheila Fogarty is with you now.
James O'Brien on LBC.